something that affects title. So, for example, we talked about liens. When you hear the word lien, what word do you hear? When you hear lien, what word do you hear?
Loan.
You hear. That's right. You guys are so cute. I can see your guys' mouths move. Yep. When you hear lien, hear loan. If you have a lien on the property, it means you owe somebody some money. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, not necessarily. I mean, let's face it, the majority of Americans out there don't have cash to purchase a $300,000 house, right? So you have the availability to get a loan through a lender, through a mortgage company. And then, of course, to protect their interest, they're going to put a lien on the property. Let's see, we also talked about easements. Easements aren't bad, are they? You like water, you like power, you like electricity, you like your internet. There's some kind of easement probably on your property to access or to have access to those things that we enjoy. So we're continuing. We got a few more encumbrances to talk about. And the next one that we're going to discuss is an encroachment. Now, encroachments are bad. There is nothing good about an encroachment. As a matter of fact, when you see the word encroachment, I would like you to see the word roach. They're bad. If there's an encroachment on your property, then your neighbor's improvement is extending over your property line. Your neighbor's property is extending over your line, or your improvement is extending over their property line. Why don't you guys tell us in the chat, what do you think? And there's some good answers, but what would you think would be the #1 encroachment? And there's some good answers. But what do you think would be the #1? And I'm agreeing with what I'm seeing. Trees, absolutely. Driveways, garages, absolutely. But probably, hands down, the #1 encroachment is the fence. Unfortunately, fencing companies generally don't require a survey before they come in and put a fence up. Somebody hires them to put a fence up. They come in and they say, I want you to put a fence here. And they do what they're told. Ideally, the homeowner would have a survey done before they put a fence up. But do you think that always happens? Unfortunately, not. The only thing you know by looking at a fence is that somebody put a fence there. You don't know if it's on the property line. You don't know if it's in or outside or on the other side. All you know when you see a fence is, hey, look, somebody put a fence there. Yeah, trees, absolutely. Trees get tricky, don't they? Because not only do you have the part of the tree that you and I see, but you got all those roots underneath the ground that we can't see. And I mean, tree roots are pretty much going to grow wherever they want to grow, right? They don't care where the property line is. And trees generally aren't a problem until they fall down. And now it's a problem, isn't it? Now whose responsibility is it? So, you know, the only answer to that is both parties got to get their insurance companies involved, possibly even attorneys if we're going to take it that far. There is usually no clear cut. I think we know insurance companies, they're not going to want to take responsibility. So you probably got a bit of a battle ahead of you. I have seen absolutely a lot of garages that could have an encroachment. So Sydney, that's a great question. Thank you for tying that in. Can an encroachment for a period of 20 years give rise to an easement by prescription? Remember what we said an easement by prescription is, you've been using somebody else's property for roughly 20 years, and now the judge says you can continue using it. So could a fence fall under that? Could you go to a judge and say, yo, my fence has been here for 21 years. It should be good to see. You guys see what we're saying? So remember, when we get into Unit 5 today, we're going to take that easement by prescription a step further and claim ownership. So it might just not be asking permission to have your fence to be there because it's been there for 20 years. But now you could possibly go to the judge and say, look, my fence has been here for 20 years. Just give me that portion of the land. Isn't that something? And that's where we're going to head today in Unit 5. So an easement by prescription, absolutely. Again, encroachments are just bad. They are just bad. Welcome. Thank you. The only way to properly identify an encroachment is to have a survey done. And we're going to talk about surveys in Unit 4. So hang on to that just for now. And the thing that makes them bad is that they can make both properties, both titles, unmarketable. If you're selling or purchasing a home that has an encroachment on it, we got to do something about it. So our options are either create an easement, give them permission to be there, or make them take the fence down, make them take the encroachment down. Y'all want to hear a funny story? This just happened earlier this year, I think around spring. My husband's coworker had a neighbor put a fence up and then had the survey done. They kind of did that backwards, didn't they? So they put the fence up and then had the survey done. And guess what the survey showed? The survey showed that his brand new fence was an encroachment. It went onto the neighbor's yard. Y'all know what he did? He came and knocked on my husband's coworker's door and said, my fence is on your property. You're going to need to pay to take that down. Look at y'all's faces. This is how people handle encroachments. So they are still fighting this out. They are still battling this. And this was like spring. This was like March or something, you know? So the moral of that story, have the survey done before you put the fence up. I mean, right? And you know, the sad part about that, you guys, the really, like, that's not the sad part, but the really sad part about that, the wives used to be friends, the kids used to have play dates together, you know, all that's done, all that's gone, over a fence. You know, when you guys, again, we'll talk about the survey, but when we get into Unit 4, but it's really common for people to look at a fence and assume that's the property line. I'm with buyers, we're in the backyard. I talk to them about the importance of a survey, and my buyers will say, Julie, we don't need a survey. Do you see that fence right there? That's going to tell me where my property line is. No, that doesn't tell you anything. All that tells you is that somebody put a fence right there. You don't know if it's inside or outside. You don't know if it's an encroachment or not until you have a survey done. Here's a picture. You can see the red is the property line, and this neighbor has like some kind of big garage or building or something. I mean, and then this is the encroachment. That's a heck of an encroachment right there, isn't it? I mean, it's not like it's over by a couple inches. I mean, that's a whole wing of that building. So encroachments, you just want to make sure you have a survey done. Again, we'll talk more about the survey in Unit 4. Encroachments are an encumbrance, and encroachments are just bad. There's just nothing good about them, and we just got to hash it out. We got to resolve it before we sell, transfer, convey the property. I think sometimes what happens is neighbors have been living side by side for many, 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 many years, and it's not a problem until one sells and the new guy comes in, and now it's a problem. Could you imagine buying a house and your doorbell, you move in and your doorbell rings and you think, oh, it's the welcome wagon, but instead it's a neighbor saying, your fence is on my property, get it off. By the way, I'm the neighbor, welcome to the neighborhood. So it's usually not a problem until it's a problem. The last section of Unit 3, which is getting us into the math, we're heading into the math, is about property taxation. And we're going to talk about taxes specifically in North Carolina and a little bit outside of North Carolina as well. North Carolina, we use something called ad valorem property tax, or real property taxes. And ad valorem just means market value. Determining market value for taxes is not the same thing as determining value for the appraisal for the purposes of originating a loan. So we need to separate taxes and appraisal. We'll talk about, I got a whole unit dedicated to the appraisal. We'll talk about that in Unit 17. But as far as determining market value for taxes, it's just a different process. It's not handled quite the same. And in North Carolina, our ad valorem taxes are a tax rate per 100. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the math in just a bit. So what do we mean by market value? Once they come out, and an appraiser does come out and determine market value for tax purposes, but they use it as like a whole neighborhood or a whole section or a whole quadrant, right? They're not just studying one specific property, one specific home. And they come in and they say the market value is X amount. And in North Carolina, that's what we base our tax rate on. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about this once we get into the math. North Carolina taxes are regulated by something called the Machinery Act. Please understand, taxes are local. So taxes are set by the local city or county or municipality. What the Machinery Act does is kind of put a ceiling on everything. They say you can't go above this. These are certain standards, certain regulations that you have to have. So while each city and county, school board, fire, emergency district, while each one can set their own tax rate, the Machinery Act gives standards, sets a ceiling, and they set standards for RPs, our real property taxes, how they're assessed, how they're appraised. And then you have some properties that are tax exempt. Maybe a nonprofit, for example, might be exempt, or maybe they're subject to a lesser tax rate. You may have, I listed a property once, and the gentleman that owned it was an elderly man, and he had a senior tax exempt status. And when the new person bought, they probably didn't qualify for that, right? So they wouldn't qualify for that senior tax exempt status. Education, facilities, charity, etc. As we said, assessing value, determining value, how we determine how much we're going to charge for taxes, our assessment. North Carolina, our assessed value is 100% of market value. That's our ad valorem. Other states may have an assessed value less than market value. North Carolina, our assessed value is market value. Other states may have a percentage less. When we do the math in just a bit, we're going to see both. We're going to see assessed value of 100%, and we're going to see it of less than 100%. And I don't need you guys to worry about what state you're standing in. You're always going to do what the problem tells you to. Okay, so if it tells you the assessed value is less than the market value, then you work the problem that way. Don't argue with the problem. Oops, whoops, whoops. Mouse got away from me there. So North Carolina, we use a tax rate, which is our tax rate, excuse me, is per 100. You guys jot that down. North Carolina is a tax rate per 100. Other states may use something called a mill, and a mill is 1/1000th. So ad valorem is per 100. A mill is 1/1000th. So for example, if the problem tells you that the tax rate is 15 mills, you just take 15 and divide it by 1,000, and your tax rate is 0.015. So North Carolina ad valorem is per 100. Mills are 1/1000th. Do you think you need to know both of those? Yes. So let's do a nice side-by-side comparison so far. In North Carolina, we use a tax rate 100th per 100. Other states use a mill, which is a 1/1000th. North Carolina, we use 100% of assessed value. Other states may have their assessed value less than market value. Again, we're going to see examples of both. Always do what the problem tells you. If the problem tells you to take 80% of assessed value, take it. Don't argue with the problem. So let's talk about in North Carolina. Let's get back home for a second. And in North Carolina, let's talk about our taxation timetable. Y'all don't have to write this down. Let's look in our books together on page 64. You got this very little graph in your book on page 64, and some dates are more important than others. So let's look in our book on 64 and we'll break down our taxation timetable. In North Carolina, on January 1st, every year, the tax lien is filed. Happy New Year. We all owe property taxes for the year. Everybody across the state of North Carolina, okay? Hang on to this January 5th date for just 1 second. Let's pretend that this taxation, this timeline we're looking at is 2022. Hang on to January 5th, just 1 second. We'll come back to this. On January 31st of 2022, the taxable property is listed. Where are my homeowners on the call? Where you at? You get some kind of letter from the county about February or so, asking you to list your personal properties, list your things. That's what we're doing. We're listing our taxable properties, personal property and real property. July 1st, just a couple weeks ago, of each year, 2022, the new tax rate is set. So the rate for the year is set. Taxes are, the bills come out in August, but they're not due and payable until September 1st. So while we wake up on January 1st, we all have a lien on our property, but it's not due until September 1st of that year. Failure to pay taxes in 2022 means January 5th of the next year, you are now delinquent. So when we get to September 1st, you don't pay your bill by January 5th, 2023, you're delinquent. They will file a lien. They want to make sure they get paid, which means you can't convey the property until you pay off any unpaid taxes. Remember, we talked about the attorney doing a public search and finding all these unpaid liens. We'll talk more about the attorney's job. So last year's tax must be paid by January 5th. January 5th, yes, that's right, is the last date. The important dates for you guys to know of all this one's pretty important. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I think that January 5th, just knowing that if you don't pay by January 5th, then you're considered late. And I also think it's important to know that we all, when we wake up on New Year's Day, we all have taxes due on January 1st. That's right. Interest, you start, they file the lien, they may charge you interest for being late on the 6th, but it's the due date is January 5th of the next year. The tax rate may change every year. Tax rates can adjust. They may adjust either according to future plans, maybe government structure. Various things can cause tax rates to adjust. In North Carolina, the assessed amount is reassessed every 8 years. We use an octennial reappraisal. Octennial means 8. So octennial reappraisal, the assessed value can be reassessed every 8 years. Everybody with me? The tax rate can change every year, but the assessed value is every 8 years. The state, the cities, municipalities, counties also have the option of doing a horizontal adjustment every 4 years. So they may do a horizontal adjustment of the assessed value every 4 years. What do they mean by that? the entire Forsyth County every 4 years might say, we're going to do a 0.5% increase across the board. Everybody. And that's what we mean by a horizontal adjustment. Everybody. Again, that would be up to the government if they're going to do it every 4 years, but they need to reassess it every 8 years. As we said earlier, the appraisal process is different, whether or not you are filing appraisal for opinion of value to originate a loan. This first bullet is what we're going to talk about in Unit 17. The process for finding assessment for tax purposes. All we're trying to do is establish tax value. I think it's so very important that we understand tax value and appraisal are two totally different things. Have you guys ever looked at a property and seen that the list price and the tax amount are like way off? And do you ever try to look at that tax value and say, well, this is how much is what? You can't do that because it's not the same thing. When you look at the tax value, all that tells you is this is how much we're assessing taxes on. It's not telling you the actual value of the property, what it's actually worth. Buyers love to do this, especially in this market, because we're in a very strong seller's market right now, and values are just up everywhere. Anywhere you go in the country right now, home values are up. And buyers may look at the tax value and see a tax value, I'm just making numbers up, of $100,000, but then they see a list price of $250,000. And buyers may try to say, that's not fair, the tax value is $100,000. They're two different things. They're not the same thing. Guys, a big part of our job is to help and to educate the public. So letting the buyer understand. And, you know, here's the good news. You may be buying this $250,000 house, but your taxes are only going to be based off of $100,000. You see what we're saying? When we talk about the tax value, we're saying this is what your taxes are based off of. So come on, don't you want a lesser amount for your taxes to be based off of? If you want to argue it, I'm sure the government will take $250,000 as your value and you can send them that money, right? But part of what we want to do is help educate the public and help them understand that tax value and actual value are two totally different things, and they shouldn't even be in the same conversation. We talked the other day about special assessments, particularly government special assessments. You could also have a special assessment by an HOA. We're going to talk about that HOA in Unit 6. But with government special assessments, they could, the city or the county or the municipality could put a government special assessment on the property to make a public improvement. So maybe they're going to install street lights or sidewalks, or maybe they're going to hook an entire community up to public sewer, for example. If the government puts a special assessment, it's for public improvement. And remember, we said our government special assessments and our real property taxes are superior liens, which means they're paid when? Superior liens are paid, that's right, they're paid first. So your real property taxes and your government special assessments are superior liens, they're always paid first. Everything else is paid in the order in which it's recorded, except for the mechanics lien is paid in the order in which the work began. So let's see, do you not want it known any improvements on the inside unless you are selling due to taxes? Selling due to taxes, I'm not sure I understand that, Trina. They're not coming inside for tax value. The appraiser will come inside when you're originating a loan, right? Because the appraiser is studying 123 Main Street. They're not studying all homes in Forsyth County.
Okay. So it's not per house, it's for the whole neighborhood.
Correct. Or the city or the municipality. That's right, for the tax purposes. And that's
Okay.
why we say the whole process is just different. Like they may not even drive down the street, right? They just might say it's 8 years, so it's time for Forsyth County to reassess.
Got it.
Now, when you're originating a loan, the appraiser is going to come to the actual property and they're going to come inside and they're going to look at improvements. And that's why it's a different process. Thank you for clarifying that. Yep. Okay. Y'all ready to do some math? Hey, here it is. Our first official formula. I think it's of my opinion, all formulas should go on a flashcard. I think all formulas should go on a flashcard. Guys, if you don't know the formula, you don't know what to do with the numbers. 80% of knowing and how to do the math is knowing the formula. I'm here to tell you guys, when you get into this information, when you really start getting into it, especially when it comes to the math, they're going to give you more information than what you need. And if you don't know the formula, you're trying to do something with all of the numbers. But the truth is, in this case, for example, I only care about my annual tax bill, my assessed value, and my tax rate. Put it on a flashcard, memorize it over and over and over again. Eve, let me get back to you on that one, please. I'll look at it on break. You're ahead of me anyway, so I'll look at it on break and let you know. So our very first T-bar tells us that our annual tax bill is the part, the assessed value is the whole. And Julie says the rate or percent always goes where? In the bottom right. So our tax rate, it's either going to be per 100 or it's going to be a mil, and it's going to be 1/1000th. We'll look at examples of both. The part, the number on top, is smaller than the number on the bottom left. So does it make sense that your annual tax bill is smaller than the assessed value? If you're paying more in taxes than what it's worth, move, get out, don't buy it to begin with. So the smaller number goes on top. And remember the handy dandy trick about our T-bar, you have choices. Work with me on the T-bar or memorize these 3 formulas. You guys have choices. Remember, I don't care how you get the right answer. Really does not matter to me. So our T-bar gives us 3 different formulas. We can now find the tax rate by taking the annual tax bill and dividing it by assessed value. We can now find the assessed value by taking the annual tax bill and dividing it by the tax rate. Or we can find the annual tax bill by taking the assessed value multiplied by the tax rate. Remember with the T-bar, my back fourth line, my east-west line means divide. My up-down line, my north-south line, if you will, means multiply. So question comes in, if you already have 2 numbers, can you solve for the missing? That's exactly what we're doing for the T-bar. I'm solving, I can only have one X, right? I can only have one unknown variable. So I have 2 of the figures, and I'm going to solve for the other one. Everybody have this? We're going to refer back to this. As you guys are practicing, it's okay to look at the formula. It's okay to look at the formula as you guys are practicing, but you got to know the formula. You got to have it in front of you. Everybody have it? So property taxes, let's see. We're going to get there. Yep, give me just 1 second. I'll get there, I promise. So property taxes are calculated 1 of 2 ways. As we said earlier, in North Carolina, we use a tax rate per 100. Remember the other day we said when you're doing math problems and you see the word of, when you see the word of in a math problem, what does that tell you to do? You guys are great. Multiply. So when you see the word of in a math problem, it tells you to multiply. When you see the word per in a math problem, a lot of times, not all the times, but a lot of times the word per means divide. So when you see tax rate per 100, For example, if the problem tells you that the city tax rate is 0.73 per 100, all you have to do is take 0.73, divide it by 100, and you get your tax rate of 0.0073. The 0.0073 is what we put in the T-bar. So what I'm telling you, when you read these problems, you may have to do a little bit of work before you get to the T-bar. I cannot put 0.73 per 100 in the T-bar. Does this make sense? I have to have a number I can work with. So I take 0.73, I divide it by 100, and now I have a number I can work with. As we mentioned earlier, you might have, this one gives us a city tax rate. You may also have a county tax rate, I'm just making stuff up, of 25, let's say 0.25 per 100. So you have a city tax rate of 0.73, you have a county of 0.25. You might have a school board, fire district, right? Hospital zoning. You may have several different tax rates. So if we take 0.25 per 100, we now get 0.0025. If the city is 0.073, the county is 0.0025, the total tax rate, 0.0073 plus 0.0025, the total tax rate is 0.0098. You see, because you got city, you got county, you got school board, you got fire district, you got all those tax rates. It's not uncommon to have multiple rates. Now, let me ask you guys this. You can shake your head one way or another. If the problem tells you the city tax rate is 0.73, the county tax rate is 0.25, and the property is located outside of the city limits, are you going to charge them city taxes outside of the city limits? No, you're just going to charge them county taxes. Everybody see? You only have to pay city taxes if you're in the city, if you're outside of the city. And this is what we mean when we say sometimes the problem will give you more information than what you need. If you just see a rate and think you're going to use it, you're going to get it wrong because you calculated city taxes when they're outside of the city limits. You've got to read those problems. Every single word means something. I actually added here, I took 0.0073 plus 0.0025, and I got 0.0098 for my total tax rate. Can you see my screen, Demetra? Where are you at? Let me find you. That's really weird. You may just want to, why don't you log out and come back in? Everybody else can see my screen? Okay, yeah. Demetra, why don't you log out and come back in and we'll see if that doesn't fix it. You're right, looking at me does not help. We want you to see your screen. Oh, good. Just wiggled your nose and fixed it. I like that. Good. Guys, I never pretend like I understand Zoom. And you know what makes it challenging is every single one of us are on a different device, right? Different brand of device, different laptop, desktop. So we're all working just a little bit different. So again, if you have problems, please let me know, or Jane or Lane, and we definitely want you to see the material. All right, so North Carolina tax rate is per 100. As we said, other states may use a mill to calculate the tax rate. So the difference is, instead of dividing by 100, if you have a mill, now you just divide by 1,000. So a mill is 1/1000. So for example, if the problem tells you that the tax rate is 17 mills, now you just take 17, divide it by 1,000, And for your T-bar, you get a tax rate of 0.017. 17 divided by 1,000. Tax rate is per 100. Mills are 1/1000th per 1,000. So what if the problem gives you 0.017 as the rate and asks you what the mill is? What's the opposite of divide? Multiply. So if you divide to get to it, then how do you do it backwards? You multiply. So when you take 0.017 and you multiply by 1,000, now you get 17 mills. That's just good advice for any math. If dividing's not working out for you, try multiply and see what happens. If adding doesn't look right to you, try subtracting and see what you get, right? Sometimes you're just kind of playing around with those numbers a little bit. Mill is 1/1000th. Okay. So we're going to go through some problems together. This is how we do math in this class. Okay. When we get to new math, we do a little introduction, give you the formula, give you the T-bar. And then we're going to do one or two together. Now I'm telling you guys, it's really easy to watch me do it. Very easy to watch me do it. The true test is whether or not you can do it or not. So once we do one or two together, then I turn you guys loose and I let you guys attempt it. And then once we talk about it in class, I give you practice. Because what have we learned so far about the math? In order to get it, in order to master it, you need to practice, practice, practice. So never, ever have concerns about whether or not I'm going to give you extra practice. I'm telling you right now, I've got you. Now, with all this being said, let's have a conversation about the math. Both my exam and your state exam, there are 8 to 12 math questions. Let's just say 10. I don't remember off the top of my head, but let's just say 10, right? With a rough number. Both of your exams will have 10 roughly math questions. The math alone can't fail you, which means you could get all the math wrong and still pass this test. So while I do think the math is important, I think there are other topics that are more important that I would rather spend more time on than spending all of our time together doing the math. And that's why I give you guys practice. Does this make sense? So we're going to go through it in class. And I agree, it helps. And this math could get you some points and it could help you in your career as well. Well, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying we got other stuff more important that we need to spend our time on than getting bogged down on this math. Is that fair? Is that fair? Okay. So this is why I give you guys practice. This is why I give you homework. If you're not good at math, maybe just try. Maybe try. That's why I give you practice. How do you know if you can do it unless you try? I can promise you something. If you don't try, I can almost promise you you won't get it. So if you want to use it to help you, then I got the practice for you. But in class, we're not spending more time than what we need to because we got to move on and we got other stuff to cover. Is everybody good with what I'm telling you? I know some of us want to spend all day in the math. I'm one of those. I'd rather do math all day than not worry about like vocabulary and terms and concepts. But guess what? We can't do that. So I have to go off the grain a bit, go from what I enjoy doing to getting back to the other stuff. Okay. All right. We move forward. So let's look at a couple of these together. When we see a math problem, what's the very first thing that we do? What's the very first thing you do? Pick your calculator up and start hitting a bunch of buttons, right? No. Just read the problem. Just read, simmer down, sit on your hands if you have to, but just read the problem. This problem says, calculate the annual property tax due for a property in Forsyth County with a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100, a market value of $285,000, and an assessed value of $250,000. So we've read the problem. What's the stem? What is the problem asking me for? Annual property taxes. When it comes to this problem, isn't that all I care about? If the information doesn't get me to the annual property taxes, I don't care about it. That's my whole focus. Some of you get your what if trail, your rabbit trails, and some of you want to go on these little tangents. You're going to get it wrong. Just focus on what the problem's asking for. Sometimes I have students that I actually encourage you on your scratch paper to write annual property taxes ? To help keep yourself focused on where we're heading. So if you find yourself heading down your what if trail, write it down, annual property taxes, to keep you focused. So we've read the problem, we've identified the stem, what's the problem asking for. I know I can use my T-bar. So the first thing I'm going to do is throw down a blank T-bar. It all starts here. I know I got to fill in some of the T-bar. Usually when I do math, I like to start with where I want to end. What do I mean by that? I want to start. The first thing I want to do is identify my X. What am I solving for? Because that is my focus. How do I know that my X goes on top? Because I've read the problem. Because I know the formula. Knowing the formula tells you where the X goes. I've read the problem and identified my X. Now I can start filling in the rest of it. I have a market value of 285,000. I have an assessed value of 250,000. What does our formula tell us? Am I looking at assessed value or market value? I'm looking at, look at your T-bar that you wrote down. I'm looking at the assessed value. So what's the distractor? What's the too much information in this problem? It's the market value. Knowing the formula is 80% of the battle. I'm not kidding when I say that. So I know my formula. I'm using 250,000 for my assessed value. And then to find my tax rate, I take 1.01, divide it by 100. And I get a rate of 0.0101. 1.01 divided by 100 gives me a rate of 0.0101. Now my T-bar is complete, right? So to solve for X, what's my up-down line mean? My up-down line means multiply. So we take 250,000 times 0.0101. And what are my annual taxes? 2,525. I took 250,000 times 0.0101, and I got $2,525. How much of my tax is going to be this year? $2,525. When is this due and payable? September 1st. So we took the assessed value, times it by the tax rate. Let me ask you guys something. Let's see what you think. And you can tell me in a chat if you like. Let's see if you guys are awake. How about a private chat? Let's do that. So you don't give the answer away to everybody. What if, instead of this problem saying annual taxes, what if this problem said monthly taxes? What if the problem asked you for monthly taxes instead of annual? What do you think you would do?
Divide by 12.
There we go. Thank you. And thank you guys for your chat. So when the problem gives you annual, the formula gives you annual. When the problem asks you for monthly, how many months in a year? 12. You got to read the problem. You've got, see how they like to trick you? Because if they were to ask you that, do you think annual would be an option, an answer choice as well? You better believe it's going to be an answer choice. So if you're going to miss the problem, miss it because you don't know it. Don't miss it because you don't do something silly like divide by 12. You guys with me? Read the problem. Pay attention to what it's actually asking for. A question comes in, if market and assessed values in the same scenario, do you always use assessed value? Yes, because what does our formula tell us? Remember what your T-bar said? Annual property taxes is part of what? Assessed value. Do you guys write that down? Look in your books real quick on page 63. You guys see those three formulas about halfway down? Annual taxes, assessed value, tax rate. We just took that and put it in a T-bar. So again, you have choices. You can either memorize those three formulas or you can try the T-bar. I'm a big fan, and I think if you can get it, but you still need to know the formula of the T-bar to know what to put where. Percent of assessed, that's right. Because again, what does our formula say? Our formula says what? Look on page 63. The formula says assessed value. It does not say market value, does it? So that's right. So if the problem wanted to know monthly taxes, we just take our 25, divide by 12, and we would have monthly taxes of $210.42. Everybody with me? See, you guys are good. You guys are awake. You're thinking, we're getting this. We're getting ready to take a break in a second. I know. Am I the only math nerd on the call? I can't be. I can't be. Thank you. Thank you guys for fessing. All right, let's work on another one. Let's look at another one together. What do we do first? Problem says to calculate the annual property tax due for a property in Forsyth County with a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100, a market value of 127,000 and an assessed value of 85% of market value. I've read the problem. I know I can use a T-bar. And the very first thing I want to do is identify my X. What am I solving for? So once again, my X, I'm solving for annual property taxes. Everybody see what we're doing? We're taking this word problem and we're making it into math. We're identifying it, translating it, if you will, into math. I have a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100. So I take 1.01 per 100 divided by 100, get 0.0101. That is my tax rate. And then I have a market value of 127,000 and an assessed value of 85% of market value. What's the word of mean? What's the word of mean? Multiply. Multiply. So we take our market value of 127,000 and I want to find 85% of that. So 127,000 times 85% gives me my assessed value of 107,950. The assessed value is what goes in my T-bar. Why? Because that's what the formula tells me. Knowing the formula tells me that that's where my assessed value is. Everybody good on where I got the 107,950. I looked at the problem. My assessed value is what? 85% of market value. Now to find my annual property taxes, I take my assessed value of 107,950 times my rate, 0.0101, up down line means multiply, and I get annual taxes of 10, we're just going to round a little bit here. Well, there, how about that? My annual property taxes for this property are $1,090.30. Good. It's not terrible, is it? You've been through worse things, I'm sure, than calculating annual property taxes. Come on. Question comes in about rounding. You know, your answer choices, you're not going to miss by rounding alone. If the problem wants you to round, it'll tell it, but you're going to have an answer choice. You're not going to have an answer choice that's like, you know, 1090, 1090.30, and 1090.295. I mean, they're not going to give you all three of those as a choice, right? So whether when you round or not, you'll be able to look at it and tell that it's the answer, right? I mean, guys, they're mean, but they're not cruel. Okay. All right. I feel like we need a break. So let's take 10. And when we come back, we got some more math to do. I'm not done with the math, but let's take 10, go get your coffee, and we'll come back and do a little bit more. And then you guys are going to do some on your own too. Did you come back for some more math? All right, let's see. Welcome back. By the way, we all have a basic calculator. We're not using our phones. Your phones are a lot smarter than this thing. And that's why I want you guys practicing on these. It's all about getting ready for those tests. All right, camera's on and I can see you. So I am taking attendance. Everybody say cheese. I don't know about all that, but all right. I did now. Thank you. Thank you. If you're not sure if I got you or not, always tell me in a private chat. I'd rather hear from you guys in a chat than have you miss that hour. Does that make sense? So if you're not sure if you were here for attendance, just tell me. Just tell me I'm back. And then that way I got you in the chat. All right. I got you now because you told me in the chat. I'm sure I did. Okay. So let's look at another one together. What is the assessed value of a property located in Kernersville with a tax rate of 0.85 per 100 and an annual tax bill of $3,371? So we've read the problem. The first thing we want to do is write down our T-bar and identify our X. Where do we want to end? What are we solving for? This time I'm looking for the assessed value. So now, knowing our formula, knowing our T-bar, we know now my X is down here in the bottom left. You guys see what we're doing? I'm looking at where I want to end. What do I care about? What's my X? So I'm solving for my assessed value. I have a tax rate of 0.85 per 100. So I take 0.85 divided by 100. And I get 0.0085. That is my tax rate. And then I have an annual tax bill of $3,371. So I have plugged in my T-bar. What's my back fourth line mean? My east-west line? It means divide. So I take on your calculator 3,371, divide it by 0.0085, and we get an assessed value of 6,588.23. If you want to round, that's fine. So what's my assessed value? I took my annual tax bill, I divided by my tax rate, and I got my assessed value of $396,588. Y'all want to know another fun thing about the T-bar? Once you solve for X, all three of those formulas work. So if you want to go back and check yourself and make sure 3371 divided by 396,588, you're going to get 0.0085, right? If you take 396,588 times 0.0085, you're going to get 3371. That's what I mean by it works. Going back to those three formulas on page 63, once you solve for X, all three of those should work out. So it's a good way to go back and check yourself and make sure that it all fits. Okay. All right. Well, as much fun as I'm having, it's your turn now. So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes. Please, when you get an answer, tell me in a private chat. I want you guys to be comfortable answering, but too, I don't want y'all giving the answer away, because I know some of you, if I let you do it in a full chat, in a chat to everybody, then some of you will just sit there patiently and wait and see what everybody else is saying. And you'll say, oh yeah, the answer is A. I think so too. But I want you guys to try it and work it on your own. So tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. You guys about 30 more seconds and then we'll talk about it. Okay. Problem says the current market value of a property is $135,000. For tax purposes, it is assessed at 60% of market value. The tax rate is 2.45 per 100 of assessed value. What is the annual tax liability? And as you can see, we're going to round just a little bit. I read the problem, throw down my T-bar, and what do I want to do first? Identify my X. The problem is asking me what my annual taxes are. I know my T-bar because I know my formula. So I know what I'm solving for is the number on top. That's all I care about. I'm telling you guys, once you get into these problems, they're going to start giving you more information than what you need. So if you can identify that, know the formula, and then identify that X. Focus on what you're solving for. Property market value is 135,000. For tax purposes, it is assessed at 60. It is assessed at 60% of market value. So to find my assessed value, I have to take my market value of 135,000. The word of means what? Multiply. So I take 135,000 times 60%, and I get my assessed value of 81,000. What's the number that goes down here? It's not the market value. It is the assessed value. So I took my market value of 135,000. Problem tells me that it is assessed at 60% of market value. 135,000 times 60% gives me $81,000. Then I take my tax rate, 2.45 per 100 divided by 100. So I have a rate of 0.0245, which is the number that goes here. 0.0245. Now I've plugged in my T-bar, and the last thing to do is to solve for X. The up-down line tells me to do what? Multiply. So I take 81,000 times 0.025, and I get annual taxes of $1,984.50, or if we round a little bit, we get an answer of C. Look at some of those smiles. It's fun getting it right, isn't it? I like, oh, I'm going to convert some of you. Y'all are going to like math by the time I'm done with you. If nothing else, I make it my personal mission to get you guys on board with the T-bar. That's my goal each class, is to get you guys on board. So hopefully as we work through a little bit more, this is just one piece of it, but a lot of this math, if you understand the concept of how the T-bar works, part over the whole and the rate, then you can get a big chunk of this math. You did it a different way and got the same answer, great. What's the objective? To get to the mall. So as long as you got the right answer, as long as you got to the mall, again, I don't want to see your work for the test. All I need to see is A, B, C, or D. Okay, everything you do is multiple choice for your exams, both exams. My question to you, if you didn't get it right, do you see now where you went wrong? Perfect. And that's how we learn. Sometimes you're going to get them wrong. What do you do when you get them wrong? Learn from it. Only make that mistake now. Don't make that mistake on test day. How do we make sure we don't do that? Practice, practice, practice. Fair enough? Well, that was so much fun. Let's do another one. Private chat, A, B, C, or D. If I can find my mouse. And I will say hint, read this one carefully. I was just looking, and some of you may want to go back and read the problem again. A couple of you have already done that. Details, huh? Give you about 30 more seconds and we'll talk about it. All right, let's see what we got here. There's a lot going on in this one, isn't it? It's a good one. I like this one. The market value of a house is $84,500. Taxes are assessed at 35% of market value. The tax rate is 30 mils. What are the monthly taxes? So I've read the problem. Step one, throw down my T-bar, and let's identify what I'm solving for. I'm looking for the what? Monthly taxes. How do I get to monthly taxes? What's my formula tell me I solve for? I solve for annual. So once I get the answer, don't I have to take another step? So we solve for annual first. See, we solve for annual first. My X is annual. How do I know that? Because I know my formula. I cannot stress the importance of that enough. Market value of a house is 84,000. Taxes are assessed at 35% of market value. So I got a market value of 84,500. Taxes are assessed of, which means multiply, 35%. So my assessed value is 29,575. A mil is what? 1/1000th. So now to find my rate, I'm going to take 30 and divide it by 1,000, not 100 this time because we're talking about mils. A mil is 1/1000. So I have a rate of 0.03. Up down line means what? Multiply. So I take $29,575 and I times it by 0.03 to get annual taxes of $887,225. If we're not paying attention and we get excited and we put down A, we just got the problem wrong. Again, if you're gonna miss the problem, miss it because you don't know it. Don't miss it because you don't do something simple like divide by 12. Okay, so now we take our annual, divide by 12 to get monthly. Our monthly taxes are 73.94, or see. Read the problem. Read it.
I have a
Question?
question.
Please.
So you said mills are for national, like other states, right?
Other states.
So we can get mills questions in states too?
Absolutely. So again, you're always going to do what the problem tells you. So when you're doing problems like these, don't think about where you're standing, just do what the problem tells you. They're not going to give you rate and mill in the same problem. Okay, so they're going to give you one or the other. All of your math, to your point, thank you for that. All of your math is on the national portion of your exam. You have no state specific math. Okay, so everything is on the national section. So again, just do what the problem tells you.
Miss Joey?
Yes.
So I got everything correct up until I noticed you divided yours by 12. I had got the 887.25. I didn't notice the 12.
The reason we divide by 12 is because the problem's asking me what the monthly taxes. Yep. See what they like to do? So again, and thank you, because you know your formula, you're solving for annual, right? But the problem wants to know monthly. So to take that a step further, you take that annual and divide by 12. So it's knowing the formula and it's reading the problem. This is why I want you guys making the mistakes and working the kinks out now. You think you'll ever make that mistake again? Probably not. Somebody asked about calculating dates. I'm just going to point out, we're not going to talk about it now. We're actually going to come back to it. Go back to your book on page 61. The bottom of 61 in North Carolina, it starts talking a little bit about prorating. We're going to get into all of that into Unit 21. So when we get to Unit 21, we're going to take our annual taxes. Let me ask you guys this. If you were buying my house today, we're going to go to closing and you're going to get the deed to my house today. Is it fair for either one of us to pay the full year's taxes? Is it fair for me to pay it? I don't think so. I only owned it until July 14th. Is it fair for you to pay it? Well, no, you didn't buy it until July 14th. So when we get to Unit 21 is like my favorite because we get to go to closing. So when we get to Unit 21, we're going to learn how we take these annual taxes and we divvy it between me and you to make it fair. So we'll see taxes again when we get to 21, and just know we'll come back to what you're seeing on page 61. We'll get to that in Unit 21. Let's just start right now with understanding annual taxes as part of the assessed value, and then our rate. May that be per 100 or a mill. It's in the homework, so you can either tack it now or wait till we get to it in 21. Okay, but make a note. We will come back to it, I promise. Any other questions? Looks like I've already converted. I got some T-bar fans already. Yay. My job for the day is done. If I don't have you loving the T-bar yet, don't worry. I'll get you. Don't worry. Don't worry. We got a lot more to go. By the end, I'm going to have all of you digging the, well, not all of you. I'm going to have many of you as I can digging the T-bar. I'm a big fan. If you didn't get that by how excited I get, I'm a big fan because it is such a big chunk of this math when we're dealing with rates or percents. And that wraps up Unit 3. So remember those key terms back on page 51, the beginning of the unit. Seriously, guys, half the battle is knowing what the word means. So use your key terms as a guide. Don't know what it means, look it up. The key point review at the end. Page 65, that'll help with practice, Michelle, absolutely. Once you do some more and get more comfortable. And then your student quiz on page 67. And there is some math on the quiz in 67. So you can work on some of the math. Again, you might see some proration math. You can put that aside for right now if you want to. If you want to tackle it, feel free, but put that aside until we come back to it when we get to Unit 21. One step at a time, right? Each unit that has math has a math concepts. So if you guys will look back with me real quick on page 63, the math concepts kind of break down. It might be another explanation for you if you want to work through that. My suggestion to you guys, when you're doing the math concepts, y'all, we don't read math, we do math. So if you're looking at page 63, do you see like example 1, example 2, example 3 at the bottom of page 63? Don't read it, do it. Take your pencil and paper and actually do it. It's gonna mean more to you if you see it in your own writing, if you see it in your own style, instead of just standing here reading, if the tax rate is da-da-da. So even if you have to take a piece of paper and cover up the solution, use that as an extra practice for you guys. Kind of another tool there. But don't just sit there and read the math, do the math. And that's even more practice for you. Take your book, let's flip back to page 803. Let's go look at page 803. 803 has some additional math practice. There are 50 problems on pages 803 to 808. I call these like the 201. So once you've mastered the end of the unit, then you could do the more trickier ones that are on page 803. So what I've done when we have math in class for the unit, I've gone through to page 803 and pulled out the numbers that relate to the math that we just did. So if you're looking at page 803, numbers 6, 18, and 38 are additional practice. I think you guys, please take a second and jot those numbers down. And every time we do math, we'll see what numbers on page 803 to 808 relate to the math that we just did. And then I got some even more practice for you guys in Learn, Test, Pass that we'll look at in just 1 second. We're going there next. Everybody have that jotted down, 6, 18, and 38? The other thing I want to just share with you guys, don't write this down, just put your pencil down, just take a second. There's something called the learning pyramid, and there's this big study up in, who did this? National Training Laboratories in Bethel, Maine. And they've done this big study about how adults learn. And what they've done is kind of breaking it down to how you guys retain the information. How much did you just get from watching us do it in class? You just picked up about, let's say 5 to 20%. That's how much you just gained. Look at how much you get when you do it on your own. So then what I mean when I say is it's really easy to watch me do it. Super easy. The true test is, can you do it on your own? And once you guys practice and you do it enough, it'll start. And this is what we're doing, is just building you up for the test. I think I told you guys the other day that when I do math tutoring, the number one question I get is, when do I divide and when do I multiply? And my highly educated response to that is just do it both ways and see what you get. Dividing doesn't work out for you, try multiply and see what happens. The second question I get in math tutoring is, can you sit with me when I take my exam? And no, I can't. So I got to break you guys off. I got to wean you off and let you go on your own. And that's why I give you so much practice, because I want you guys doing your own thing on your own so you can increase your retention. Good? Good. So let's go look at Learn, Test, Pass. And in Learn, Test, Pass, in the Unit 3 material, I have a property tax math homework worksheet. So there's extra practice here for you guys. What is this? This is an extra 11 problems. Again, maybe some proration in there. If you want to tackle it now, great. If not, don't worry about it. We'll get to it. So I got some extra in here for you and Learn, Test, Pass. And then, of course, I include the solutions. Y'all don't study the solutions. That doesn't help you. Try the math first. Try it on your own first, and then use the solutions if you do get stuck. You know, you got it right, that kind of thing. Questions? Unit 3, questions, comments? Everybody good? Some thumbs ups? Good, good. Y'all want to play a game? Let's put math behind us for a second. Let's be done with math for now. Let's play a game. Anybody familiar with a game called Kahoot? Oh, we're going to Kahoot. I like to Kahoot. Anybody ever Kahooted before? So what's happening? You guys get your phones. I think the easiest way to access is to scan the QR code. Scan the QR code. If you don't want to scan the QR code, you also have the option of downloading the app. That takes longer. Or going to the website, kahoot.it. If you do the app or the website, you'll need a game pin, which this one is 850-8175. If you're just scanning the QR code, it just brings you right in. Once you're in, it's going to ask you for a name. I'm okay if you want to use a nickname, just keep it clean. And as you guys are coming in, what we're getting ready to do with Kahoot, we'll have a practice question. You're going to see a question. Now that you're in, you don't see anything on your phone, so don't get excited just yet. So I'm going to put a question up on the screen, and you guys are going to read a question on the screen, and then you're going to have 4 answer choices. And those answer choices will be on your phone. So you'll be able to select if you think they don't do A, B, C, or D. They do like red, green, blue, and yellow, or some kind of weird mustard color. So once you see the answer choices, once the question comes up, then you'll see the answer choices and you can select what you think the answer is. Nobody will ever know what answer you chose. So if you get it wrong, it's only you, which again is okay. It's part of learning. They do grade you on who gets it right and who answers the fastest. So we get a podium, we get to see who our first place, second place, and third place winners are. Kahoot, I like it. It kind of gives us a break from the PowerPoint for a second, but it also helps us see as a whole. We'll see all the answers as a whole of the class. And then we'll be able to see how we're doing as a whole. If we have anything we need to clarify, anything we need to work out. So I got maybe if your phone goes to sleep, it'll look like it kick you out. And guys, please be careful before you select your answer, because with Kahoot you can't change your answers. So once you're in, you're in. So don't answer so quickly that you. I hear that a lot. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Bottom line, as long as you know what the answer is, that's what's important. Is everybody in that wants to play? I don't know why you wouldn't want to play. It's a whole lot of fun. We good? Y'all ready, Kahoot? All right, so I'm going to start it. And again, this is, by the way, from units 2 and 3. So you're getting ready to see a question on the screen. The main purpose of the North Carolina Real Estate Commission is, now look at your phone. You want to say the red answer, the blue answer, the weird mustard color, or the green answer? You guys see? So you select what color you think the answer is. Again, this is our warm up. Couple more seconds. I usually don't talk, by the way. I do let you let you think. And then it tells us overall what everybody says. So the main purpose of the Real Estate Commission is to do what? Protect the public. Do I have a funny guy in here that says they have no purpose? Come on, they do have a purpose. What's their purpose? To protect the public. Do they issue you your real estate license? Yes, they do. Is that their main purpose? No, their main purpose is to protect the public. Remember the other day we said you may have a good answer, but there might also be a better answer. How they issue you your license, why they issue you your license, is to protect the public. Everybody with me? So yes, that's something that they do, and they do make money too, by the way, but that's not their main purpose. And that's how we Kahoot. Isn't that a good time? Yay. All right. And then, like I said, it gives us a podium. So it tells us who answered it right the fastest. So Devin got in first, then Anna Grace, Jerome, Lily, and Haley. Y'all ready to Kahoot for real this time? I do stop talking. I know, right? I do stop talking. All right. Question number 2. The rights of ownership of real property include all of the following except. 10 seconds. Rights of ownership of real property include all the following except appurtenant. Appurtenant is not a property right. Appurtenant means what? It runs with the land. How do we know our property rights? We can remember deep C. Disposition, exclusion, enjoyment, possession, and control. Remember our legal bundle of rights, our twigs? Those are our rights of ownership. Any questions on this one? So now we got, a lot of this is who answers it fast. Anna Grace got in this time, Haley, Sydney, Jerome, and Ashley C. Getting in and getting it fast. It's more important to me that you guys get it right than it is to get on the podium. I almost wish I could turn this off on Kahoot, but I can't, so here we are. Question number 3. The rights of an owner of property located along the banks of a small stream are called? Ten seconds. The rights of the owner of property located across a small stream are called riparian. We had 2 water rights, right? Riparian and littoral. Riparian are those properties that border a body of water without a tide. Littoral are those rights the properties owners have that border a body of water with a tide. So the answer is going to be riparian because a small stream doesn't have a tide. Questions on this one? So now we got Anna Grace is staying on top. Just quick draw. Sydney bumped up. Haley, Jerome, and Shy. And Hannah tells us is our highest climber, up 15 places this time. Good job. Question number 4. A brother and sister cannot concurrently own real estate in North Carolina as? Ten seconds. Brother and sister cannot concurrently own real estate in North Carolina as tenants by the entirety. Who is tenants by the entirety for? Married people. North Carolina, brother and sister can't be married because, you know, ew. So if brother and sister want to buy property, they can either be tenants in common or joint tenants. Everybody with me? Tenants by the entirety is for married people. Questions on this one? All right. So we got Sydney on the top, Devin, Jerome, Haley, and Mario crept up. Let's see. 11 of you are on fire. Does your phone tell you you're on fire? I think if you look at your phone, you may have a little, that means you've gone on an answer streak. Welcome back. Number 5, which of the following is a lien on real estate? Ten seconds. Did you answer too fast? Which of the following is a lien on real estate? When you see lien, you see the word what? Loan. If you have a mortgage, you owe somebody money. Who do you owe money to? Your lender, the person that helps you buy the house to begin with. Everything on here is an encumbrance, yes? But what we're looking for particularly was a lien, a loan on the property. You owe your lender some money. So the mortgage is the lien. Questions? So we got Sydney and Jerome's climbed up. Mario's climbing up. Haley and Shy's climbing up. Rhonda's our highest climber this round, up 10 places. Good job. And the last one for this Kahoot, real property taxation in North Carolina. Ten seconds. Property taxation in North Carolina says the due date each year is when? September 1st. We know on January 1st, we have to pay taxes. The problem is we don't know yet how much because we don't get the bill. The bills aren't mailed until August. It's not late until after January 5th. We reassess every 8 years, our octennial appraisal. Questions? You guys did good. Good Kahoot. Was that fun? Did we like to Kahoot? Good times, right? All right. Welcome back. So now what we do is our podium winner. We get the final. So our third place is Mario M. Yay, Mario. Our second place is Haley. Good job, Haley. And our first place is, dun, 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 it's so dramatic, Sydney. So good job, everybody. And I think it even tells me, yeah, runners up are Shy and Michelle. So, but good job, everybody. That was a good Kahoot. Remember, I'm recording. So if you want to go back through and do the Kahoot again, I mean, you can't play on the recording, right? But you can play in your mind. So you could go back and watch this again. Funnily enough, I miss being in person with you guys, by the way. I mean, I'm glad we have Zoom as a, means, but I do miss, just so you know, back in the day when we were in person, I would give my first, second, and third place Kahooters candy bars of your choice. So my candy bar budget has drastically decreased since now we're on Zoom, since I can't do that anymore. But what I think is, I think every single one of you should go out this afternoon and get yourself a candy bar. That's what I think you should do. So good job. Fair enough. Will you guys do that? Your candy bar of choice. You deserve it. Okay. All right. I know we're just a few minutes early for break, but let's go ahead and take a break now. We come back, we're ready to start in Unit 4. So let's take 10. Yeah, do we have a question? You said accidental on mute. All right, are we back? Cameras are on and I can see you. So I am taking attendance.
Miss Julie, I'm sorry. I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So chapter 3, there's a question and it's asking about, let me pull it back. I tried to type it, but then it went away. It says, Jennifer owns property in Chapel Hill, which has 100 feet of a street on one boundary. I don't know what that means. On one boundary. What does that mean?
Actually, we're getting ready to talk about that right now.
Oh,
So,
good. Thank you.
yep. Hang on to that. We're going to talk about this whole unit is about property descriptions, property boundaries, that kind of thing. So, yep. See, this is, I guess, where I don't want to say challenging, but you know, I may not, the book doesn't go in the same order as Learn, Test, Pass, may not go in the same order as what we do, right? So, what I can tell you, what I can say is, we'll eventually get to it. If you need to. So you may see some stuff in Learn, Test, Pass before we talk about it in class. To your point, you may see some things in the book before we talk about it in class. So kind of take that with a grain of salt, right? I don't want you guys beating yourself up if you don't understand it before we talk about it. So just know that we will eventually get to it. And yes, I have taken attendance. So if I missed you, best bet just to tell me you're here in the chat, so I can know that I can get you when I look at it. So thank you. Okay. All right. Unit 4 is about our property descriptions. So in Unit 4, we're going to describe the different types of legal descriptions. There are several different ways that we can identify legal descriptions. We're going to talk a little bit more about the survey. And then at the end of Unit 4, we have some more math. There's area and related calculations. Here's the good news. I'm not going to do Unit 4 math today. We've already done math today. And I'm really not a mean person. I'm not giving you two big maths in one day. So we're going to go through the first part of Unit 4 now. We're going to skip the math for today. Anybody want to guess what we're going to do very first thing Tuesday morning when we come back together? We're going to do Unit 4 math. Okay, everybody good with that? So we'll start on 4 today. We'll jump ahead to Unit 5, get as far as we can in 5. And then when we come together first thing Tuesday morning, we'll start out the week with doing Unit 4 math. That gives you guys an opportunity to better wrap your brains around property tax or taxation math. And then let you start fresh on Tuesday morning with Unit 4 math. Fair enough? Everybody good with that? Okay. So if you've looked ahead at Unit 4, it's only what? Without the math, it's only like 6 pages. So it's not going to take us long to get through this part, the first part. Not a whole lot to say in Unit 4. So let's first start talking about this legal description. The legal description is exact location of a parcel of land. When we're referring to a parcel, we're referring to the land itself. And what we're looking for in the legal description is what you see these lines right here. These are your property lines, your property boundaries. And what we're looking for, what's going to convey is all the improvements within the property boundaries. So for example, within this parcel right here, you have the little house. Maybe you have a shed, you know, the fence, whatever, all the improvements. The only way to identify the property boundaries, the property lines, is to have a survey done. And a survey is performed by a surveyor. Another one of those professionals that we use. If your buyers or sellers ever have any questions about where their property line is or the property line of the property they're interested in buying, what we need to do is send them to the surveyor, encourage them to have a survey done. We'll talk about the survey in just a second. So property boundaries, property lines, it tells us what that parcel of land is. And anything within that parcel of land is going to convey in the sale. The improvements are going to convey. There are 4 different legal descriptions, 4 different ways to find the legal description. The first way to identify the legal description is something called meets and bounds. Meets and bounds is the way to identify the legal description, primarily in the original 13 colonies. And yes, that includes North Carolina. So what's the #1 way in North Carolina to identify the property boundaries, the property lines? Meets and bounds. Meets and bounds, and we're going to look at a picture in just a second. Meets and bounds uses a point of beginning. And the POB is the starting place and the ending place. So what we're doing with the meets and bounds, or what the surveyor is doing with the meets and bounds, they're starting at one point, one corner of the property, and they're taking a tour of the parameter. They're taking a tour of the property on the property lines. And they move from monument to monument. Monuments can be natural. It could be a tree. It could be a stone. It could be a pond. Monuments can also be placed there by the surveyor. Have you guys ever seen a stake in the ground with a little pink flag on it? That's the telltale sign that a surveyor has been there. And what that surveyor is doing, they don't have a natural monument that they can use. So they put their own in, so they know how to tour around the different corners of the property. One thing we're going to talk about when we discuss surveys in just a minute, all buyers should be encouraged to have a survey done, even if the seller is willing to share their survey. And first off, I stress the word if, because most sellers aren't. But even if the seller is willing to share their survey from when they purchased, all buyers should be encouraged to have their own survey done. And part of the reason for that is because sometimes monuments move. Do trees fall down? Do rocks roll away? Right? Do kids get bored in the middle of summertime and come and remove those stakes? Yeah. So sometimes monuments move. So all buyers should always be encouraged to have their own survey done. Again, we will talk about the importance of a survey in just a second. The meets and bounds, the tour of the parameter of the properties. The meets and bounds is the calls. How many feet, what direction, southeast, 180 feet to this monument. And again, they use these calls, these meets and bounds, to make their way around the parameter of the property. So let's look at a picture. We start with the point of beginning up here in the top corner, and then the meets and bounds, the calls, tell us to go south 80 degrees east for 180 feet. We get to this corner, we hit a monument, we know to turn. Down to this monument, and back up to the point of beginning. So it's a tour of the parameter, and everything included in the parameter is going to convey with the property unless it's excluded. Look with me in your book, page 73. There's another picture there. You can see again the tour. Point of beginning is on the southeast corner there of Jones Road and Skull Drive. So we go down Skull Drive to a monument, and then we turn down and go to Red Skull Creek. Using Red Skull Creek as our property line in this case, back to Jones Road, and then back up to the intersection. Look right above that picture. Do you guys see the little paragraph that starts with a tract of land located in blank blank, described as follows? And then it gets into some kind of weird, what is it saying? That's surveyor speak. That's how surveyors, that's their language. We are not surveyors unless you are. Our job is not to interpret this. That's the surveyor's job. Is everybody hearing me? My job, when my buyer says, what the heck does that mean? My job is to say, let's call our surveyor and find out. Okay. Guys, we've got to stay in our lane. If you're not a surveyor, a licensed surveyor, you can't act like a surveyor. Okay. Stay in your lane. Questions on meets and bounds? Okay. Another way to identify the legal description, the property lines, is called the rectangular government survey. The rectangular government survey is not used in North Carolina. Look at this picture. Does this look like our topography? Does this look like our state? Have you ever flown over our state or seen an aerial picture of our state? We got mountains, don't we? We got hills, we got rolling hills. This looks pretty flat to me, doesn't it? The rectangular government survey is typically used west of the Mississippi. And what the rectangular government survey system is, think of just putting a grid over a map. It's a grid system. And the rectangular government survey uses meridians and baselines. Meridians are your north-south lines. Baselines are your east-west. So you put a grid over a map. Let's see. We'll look at a picture in just a second. I got ahead of myself. So you used west of the Mississippi. Have you guys ever like flown out to Vegas or something and looked out the window of the plane? That's pretty much what we're looking at here, right? Bunch of flat, bunch of squares and rectangles. That's why we're doing west of the Mississippi. Very rarely used in North Carolina. Not saying it's not, just saying very rarely. And with the rectangular survey, each grid is a township. And each township has 36 sections. And every single section has 640 acres. You need to know 36 sections, 36 townships in a section, 640 acres in a section. What's the best way to learn these numbers? Put them on a flashcard. So now we can look at a picture in our book on page 76. And you see, you first have your first township. An area, a city or a county or municipality can be made up of multiple townships, okay? But this one particular township, 36 sections, you always start counting at the top right. You see number 1 there in the top right? And they say you count the sections of a township like you're plowing a field. Well, I myself have never personally plowed a field, but if you look at it, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Starting on the top right and working our way left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you come down to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, kind of like you're plowing a field, right? Each section, section 8 has 640 acres, section 27 has 640 acres. Every single section has 640 acres. So in our books on page 76, if you were to take section 16 and blow it up, that's what you're looking at in figure 4.6. So we took section 16 and we blew it up. And every one of those subsections, if you will, are the different property lines, the different owners. So you don't have one person, maybe you do, but you're not going to have one person that owns 640 acres, right? Own a whole section. You're going to have multiple owners, multiple properties within that section. There is more math in Unit 4 than what you need to know for your test. I'm only going to go over the math that you need to know for your test. How you find a section, identifying how many acres in a section or how many acres in a section of a section. It's in your book, but you don't have to worry about it. If you want to, great, but we're not going to go over it in class. The math you need to know for your exam is what we're going to do Tuesday morning. So I just tell you that because I don't want you guys stressing out reading Unit 4 going, oh no, we didn't talk about that in class. If we're not talking about it in class, then you don't need to worry about it for your test. If you're looking at it, it's just more for your information. Fair enough? Let me help you. Another number you need to know. Y'all ready? This is the big one. Each acre has 43,560 square feet. How many square feet are in an acre? 43,560. And that is just a measurement. I don't care if you're in North Carolina or if you're out in California. Every single acre contains 43,560 square feet. This is the math that we're going to do on Tuesday. We're going to spend more time with this 43,560. Your homework for this weekend is to memorize that number. When we come in on Tuesday, I'm going to say, how many square feet are in an acre? And I want every single one of you to say, Julie, there are 43,560 square feet in 1 acre. Put it on a flashcard. Some people like tips and tricks to remember these numbers. My favorite, 4 little old ladies driving 35 and a 60. 4, have we been behind them before? 4 little old ladies driving 35 and a 60. Some people like to remember this. 4 plus 3 is 7. 5 plus 6 is 11. So if you remember 7-11, if you just put it on a flashcard and memorize, I don't care. 43,560 square feet an acre. Guys, this is the number we use, not just for your test, but we use it every single day in real estate. Every single day. So this is the math that we're working towards on Tuesday. 43,560 square feet in an acre. Everybody got it written down? Write it down again. What the heck? Write it down again. Repetition. Square feet is different than feet. Yeah, we're going to define square feet. We got a formula for square feet. We'll tell you how we can arrive at that. And when we do this area math on Tuesday, it's not just looking at lands, but we'll also be looking at square feet of like a room. So if you guys, when you're looking at properties online, like your favorite realtor.com or Zillow or whatever, and sometimes you see like kitchen dimensions, you know, if the kitchen is 11 by 13, that'll help us identify the square feet of the kitchen. So we're going to talk about both measuring a room, measuring a house, and determining the square feet or the acres of a tract of land. So we'll talk about both. Yep. So we got meets and bounds. We got the rectangular government survey system. The third legal description that we have is reference to a recorded plat. When I say recorded plat, I'm referring to a plat map. The recorded plat map is recorded in the county where the land is located. We're going to talk about recording. We're getting there in Unit 5. This is the most common way for a urban property. Think about like a subdivision, for example. You're probably not going to have a plat map downtown anywhere. But once you have a subdivision, one way that they like to plat out the land is to have a plat map. So let's look at page 78. 78 gives us an example of a plat map. And you can see you got Deering Lane on the left, the road. Lot number 1 starts with the top left. And then it works its way around the cul-de-sac. You guys seeing this? There's lot 1, there's lot 2, there's lot 3, there's lot 4 around the cul-de-sac, 5, 6, 7, and 8 back out to the road. The plat map gives us the lot dimensions. So if we look at lot 1, we see the lot dimensions are 50 by 80 by 70. If there's any easements, look at the bottom. You see that dotted line that goes across the back of lot 8765? You guys see that dotted line? That would be some kind of easement. It's identifying an easement there. Again, you guys, I'm not a surveyor. So even if I have access to the plat map, when my buyer looks at me and says, what the heck does all this mean? I can try to help them identify it, but I can't interpret it for them. And if they have any questions about any of the specifications, then we need to encourage them to have a survey done. We need to encourage them to have a meets and bounds done to properly identify those lines. So plat map. We can use this in North Carolina if it's available. If it's not available, we do meets and bounds. If there's questions, we encourage to do meets and bounds. The fourth legal description is reference to a recorded deed, and we're not using this much today. Again, all buyers are encouraged to have their own survey done. The deed, and we're going to talk about the deed in Unit 5. The deed usually has some kind of legal description. It might be like Exhibit A. And the legal description that you see in the deed is similar to that verbiage that we saw back on page 73, the surveyors speak. So your deed might say, see Exhibit A for the legal description. And then it tells you, you know, beginning at the intersection, turn here, turn there. The reason we don't rely on these much anymore, I'm going to be honest, we got lazy at one point, and instead of actually putting a legal description in Exhibit A, on the deed, we just said, see previously recorded deed. So you do your research, you go back to the public records and you find the previously recorded deed. And you know what that deed said? See previously recorded deed. So we got a little lazy there for a while. We stopped listing the legal description. And now we're learning, okay, there's a reason why we're there. We're back now, we're doing them again. But all it is a description. It doesn't give you a picture. It doesn't give you the actual survey. Like we said, sometimes monuments move. So of the four, this is the most less used one. Properties also have an informal reference. The most common informal reference is the street address. The street address is informal. Do street names, do they rename streets sometimes? Do they renumber streets sometimes? Sometimes they do. When you're conveying property, the street address alone is not sufficient. So for example, on our sales contract, of course we have the street address, but we also are required to have a legal description, to have the information, the property description. Street address alone is not sufficient when you're conveying property. There are certain places, more rural, that's a hard word, rural places where the street address and the mailing address aren't the same. So you might have a street address like, you know, whatever Main Street, and then the mailing address might be Route 8, something, something. So relying only on the street address is not gonna be sufficient. All right, let's talk about the survey. Surveys are prepared by licensed surveyors. If you're not a surveyor, you can't act like a surveyor, licensed surveyor. Survey is the best method to identify encroachments. Your improvement extends onto somebody else's property. Title insurance issue. Now we're getting ready to talk about title insurance in Unit 5. And any flood hazards. Surveys can help us identify flood zones. I got a whole unit dedicated to property insurance. We'll talk about this Unit 13, and we'll talk about property insurance. And I'm here to tell you, you got homeowners insurance, but if your property is located in a flood zone, you're going to have to pay flood insurance, and flood insurance ain't cheap. So we want to make sure that we identify, the lender may want to identify if it's in a flood zone or not. For example, we'll talk about that in Unit 13. Remember what we said earlier? For example, when you see a fence, what do we know when you see a fence? Does that tell you the property lines? You can do your head one way or another. When you see a fence, do you know that a survey was done and it was laid and that it's within the property lines? Absolutely not. The only thing you know by looking at a fence is that somebody put a fence there. And as I told you guys earlier, I can't tell you how many times I've been with buyers and we've been out in the backyard and I've talked about a survey and they say, Julie, I don't need a survey. Do you see that fence right there? That tells me where my property is. No, it doesn't. You know what else I've heard? I've heard this. Buyers will say, Julie, I can see the mow line. I don't need a survey done. I can see. Are you kidding me? The 14-year-old down the street could have mowed the yard, right? What does the mow line tell you? Nothing. The only way to properly identify the property lines is to have the survey done. It really blows my mind how many buyers choose to waive the survey. I think they think they're saving money. And it's one of these things, you guys, it's not a problem until it's a problem, and now it's a problem. If your buyer waives the survey, I ask you, can I make anybody do anything? Can I force anybody to get a survey? I've yet to figure out how to make anybody do anything. So if they choose not to have the survey, my job is to tell them the possible consequences of waiving that survey. How do you know if there's an encroachment or not? But the biggest issue, we're going to talk about something called title insurance. Title insurance protects the current owner from errors of the past. So if they waive the survey, we find out after closing that the fence is an encroachment, for example, title insurance is not going to protect that owner. Title insurance is going to say, had you had the survey done before you purchased, it would have been addressed and taken care of, and we wouldn't be here today. So it's really important, and again, we'll talk more about title insurance, don't worry, but it's really important that we encourage our buyers to have a survey done, talk to them about the importance. But what you and I need to understand is, bottom line, whether or not they have a survey or not is up to them. I can't make them do it. I want you guys to write something down for me. If you haven't already, I can't remember if I've said it yet or not. I want you to write something down for me. Write it down again if I have. I need you guys to document everything. Write that down. Document everything. Do you think you would want to document the conversation you have with your buyer about the importance of having a survey? Everybody, please shake your head yes. If your buyer waives the survey, you've explained it to him, you did your job and you explained it, they choose to waive the survey, they go to closing, they purchase the property, they find out there's a problem. Who is one person they think they may try to come after? Me. And you know what saves me? You know what protects me? My documentation. If you have a conversation with somebody of substance verbally, go home and follow it up with an email. Talking about, per our conversation, I think it's really important you have a survey, because, does everybody hear what I'm telling you? If you ever get yourself in trouble, your out is your documentation. So I need you guys to document everything. And when you have a conversation, even if they waive the survey, again, I can't make them do it. My job is to tell them the importance and to encourage them to have a survey done. If they choose to waive it, I have documentation that I tried. Do they have forms for things like that? I do have a form for that. We'll look at forms. We haven't gotten to, but yes, I do have a form that allows my buyers and sellers to document, select, or excuse me, waive and select different services. And one of those is the survey. I would also still have my email or text communication as well. It's one thing to say, do you want this? It's another thing to actually explain to them the importance of having it. So we do have a form for that. Should the seller get a survey when listing? I've never known a seller to order a survey. I mean, can they? Of course they can. But I've never known a seller to have a survey when they're listing the property. So the realtor should suggest to the buyer to get a survey. Yes. You just bought a house in May and that wasn't mentioned. I do apologize. Remember, your past experience is not what you're going to be tested on. So what is the question? What is the test going to talk to you about? The importance of having a survey and how we should encourage our buyers to have a survey. Everybody with me? Did y'all write that down? Document what? Everything. What's that old saying? If you didn't document it, you didn't do it. So how do you prove you had this conversation? You document it. Are there differences for buyer and seller? No, because we're still surveying the same land, right? We're still surveying the same land. That's right. If you got oral, you got nothing. If you didn't document it, you didn't do it. Is having a survey one of those things that we were supposed to do, but isn't really done in practice? Yes. As I said, it blows my mind how many buyers waive the survey. Even after my conversation and my pleading and my begging, they say, somebody asked what's the cost. It depends on the size of the land, but let's just pretend a quarter acre. You're maybe looking at starting about $500–600, something like that. The more acreage you add, the more topography you add, the more expenses it's going to get. So each land is different. But let me ask you guys, what is $600 in the big picture of buying a house? So I don't understand I'm going to save $600 and not have this survey. And I think part of it is buyers think they want to save some money. I'm going to be honest. I think another part of it is not all agents do a good job of explaining the importance of it. My job is to protect my buyers and sellers. And how can I protect my buyer from anything that could be discovered in a survey? Highly recommend that they have a survey done. That's exactly right. You don't spend that $600 now, you may be spending more later, because now we got issues that title insurance isn't going to cover you on. You got to fix them yourself. Again, I'm sorry you've bought property and never had it encouraged. That's not what you're going to be tested on. I encourage you guys to focus on this and not necessarily your past experience. Is this done during due diligence? Yes. We'll talk about due diligence when we get into units 9 and 10. Do I think surveys were done prior to making it, prior to becoming a seller's market? I think we've always had a problem with surveys. Interestingly enough, insurance companies used to require surveys, so this was never an issue. But that's changed, and now they don't care if you get a survey or not. And now that it's no longer required, can it be tied into the cost? Most surveyors won't, they'll go out and do it if they're not paid, but they won't release it. So it'd be one of those costs, one of those expenses in purchasing a home. And again, we'll talk all about that. Units 9 and 10, we get into our contract. Unit 21, we actually go to closing. So we'll talk about some of those expenses. Again, you guys, my job is to explain the importance, why my buyers should consider having a survey done. Could it make your offer more competitive? Well, no, because we just said it's part of your due diligence. So, you know, once you're under contract, that's the buyer's right to investigate the property, to learn as much about the property as they possibly can. And what's one way they can learn about the property? To have a survey done. Okay. Again, so all of you, some of you have experience. My concern about your past experience might differ than what we're trying to focus on here. So, you know, turn HGTV off and put your past experience aside just for now. We just want you to focus on what we need to help you not only get through the test, but I mean, do you want to best protect your buyers once you get your license? One way you can protect your buyers is to discuss the importance of a survey. Okay. Well, for today, we're done with Unit 4. So we're going to skip all of this. Don't look. So when we come back on Tuesday is when we'll do the math, when we'll finish up Unit 4. Again, I've already given you guys a good math today, and I really don't like to overwhelm you with math. So look at the math that we covered at the end of Unit 3, property taxation. If you want to look ahead, the math concepts for Unit 4 is on page 80. The problem with Unit 4 is there's more math in Unit 4 than what you need for your test. So as you're looking ahead, just know we may not talk about it all on Tuesday. We're only going to focus on what you need to know for your test. Question comes in, mortgage companies require title insurance. That's true. Are surveys required? No. Surveys used to be required. Insurance companies used to require. They don't anymore. They leave it up to the option of the purchaser. It's my experience. Most people choose not to get a survey. Yeah. My husband and I just bought this house about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. And when we bought, we had a survey done because, you know, I was our agent and I'm a pretty good agent. So I had us get a survey done. And one of the concerns I had, we have a shed in the back of our yard. I think I got an accident on you. Hang on just a second. So there's a shed in the back corner of my yard, and I was a little concerned because just trying to, you know, eyeball the property line, I felt like the shed was close. So we're going to have a survey done. We want to identify our property lines. The survey came back. The back corner of my shed is in by a whole foot. But you know what? It's in. And I have a survey to prove that. And if my neighbor wants to come knocking on my door and saying, your shed is on my yard and my property, I now have a survey proving that it is on mine, that it is in. So that, if nothing else, that can settle some differences. If neighbors are truly in dispute, go in together on the cost of a survey. Let's get this resolved. You guys can split that cost and then we know for sure. Property lines is probably one of the neighbors' biggest disputes. So if we have concerns, let's just have a survey done. That's right. It gives you peace of mind. I now knew my shed was good. My neighbor's really cool and she's never said anything about it, but I didn't know that when I was under contract, right? So if nothing else, it can resolve disputes. Questions? All right, let's skip ahead. Now we're on Unit 5, which starts on page 85. And in Unit 5, we're going to talk about transfer of title. So in Unit 5, we're going to talk about some different methods for transferring title. We're going to talk about deeds. And we're going to talk about some essential and non-essential elements of a deed. And guess what? We just don't have one deed. We have a couple different types of deeds. We're going to talk about the attorney's job, the closing attorney's job, their process of doing a title examination, recording. We'll talk about title insurance. there is just a little bit of math at the end of Unit 5. I don't think we'll get to it today. So we'll do Unit 4 math on Tuesday, and this will take us about 5 minutes to get through. So if we don't get to it today, then we will have 2 maths on Tuesday, but that's okay. Excise tax math is fairly straightforward. So before we get into it, you guys please turn with me to page 86 in your book. Do you guys see that chart at the bottom of page 86? We're going to start introducing you guys to some terms, to some words. And I think using this chart helps us. So we're going to start identifying some people. You can tell the type of document. And then you see where it says giver and receiver. So we have, like, for example, when we're talking about the deed, we have the grantor and the grantee. I would like you guys to take your pen and above where it says giver, write a big O-R. O-R. And above where it says receiver, I would like you to write a big E-E, double E. This will probably be the last time you hear me say giver and receiver. Going forward, what you will hear me say is giver and receive-e. How we can identify the people who is giving the document and who is receiving the document is how it ends. So, for example, the grantor is the giver of the deed. The grantee is the receivee of the deed. The buyer is giving their deed to the seller. You guys see what we're doing here? Anytime, let's go back for just a second. You heard employer and employee. The employer is who? The person given the job. The employee is the person receiving it. So we can use that O-R-E-E for a couple different aspects. This unit just focuses on the deed. So we're going to talk about the grantor and the grantee. We'll reference back to this when we start talking about the offer, when we talk about the mortgage. We'll reference back to this little chart so we can very clearly understand who the giver of a document is and the receivee of a document. You guys got that jotted down? O-R and E-E. And that'll help us identify who. So, Unit 5 starts talking about title. Title is just the right to or the ownership of the land. Title and deed are pretty much the same thing. Title is the idea. The deed is the documentary evidence. Title is the idea that you own the property. The deed is the tangible proof. The deed is the piece of paper, the thing that you can actually touch and put your hands on it and say, I own this property. I do not have a piece of paper right here. I own this property. I am the owner of record. Here is my deed. So title is the idea. The deed is the proof, the documentary evidence. And what title and deed give us, they represent the owner's legal bundle of rights, remember from Unit 2. And the reason we have the deed is to protect owners from other parties, from any interested parties. If you have that piece of paper, your name is on that piece of paper, you have proof that you are that owner of record. So if anybody else shows up, maybe a long lost relative shows up and says, this is my property, if you have that deed, you have proof that it's yours. So title is the idea, deed is the proof. And there's a couple different ways that we can transfer title. How do we transfer title? The first way that we transfer title is called voluntary alienation. If you're alienation, if you're alienating, it means you're separating yourself from that title. And you're doing it on your own free accord. You're selling the property, and you're either offering it via a deed, sharing your deed on to somebody else, or you're giving it a gift. Maybe you want to gift your property to your children, for example. So voluntary alienation, you are voluntarily separating yourself from your property. And how we voluntarily separate ourselves from the property is through a deed. This list, before y'all start writing, this list, this very list, word for word, is on the top of page 87. If there's any questions about the validity of a deed, how valid is it? The judge is going to look for certain essential elements. There are certain things that are required. When we talk about essential elements, I tend to think of like required ingredients. Let's say, for example, you're baking a cake. Aren't there certain ingredients required to have a cake? Don't you have to have flour and oil and water and an egg? Failure to put the flour in means you don't have cake, do you? You have like goo. So if you don't have the required ingredients, if you don't have the essential elements, then you don't have a valid deed. So how is the judge trying to determine if this deed is valid? They're looking for the essential elements. What are the essential elements? Well, it's got to be in writing. Doesn't that kind of make sense? If we got documentary evidence, then we got it on a piece of paper and we need to have it in writing. Another essential element of a valid deed, we have to have legal capacity of the grantor. Who's the grantor? The grantor is the giver of the deed or the seller. Guys, it is way too easy on your test to call them the seller. What are they going to call them? The grantor. So we have to have legal capacity of the grantor. The deed is going to name both parties, grantor and grantee. A valid deed has to have words of conveyance. Words of conveyance state the grantor's intentions to convey the property. The deed is actually going to say, I, the grantor, give you, the grantee, my property at 123 Main Street. Words of conveyance, you got to state the intention to convey the property. There's our accurate legal description. Again, we mentioned earlier about having like an exhibit A on a deed, maybe, possibly, that gives us the legal description. The deed is signed by the grantor. Does the grantee sign the deed? Does the buyer sign the deed? No, just the seller. The seller has to sign, the grantor has to sign it over to the grantee. The grantee has to accept it. One way they show that they have accepted it is because we record it. We take the buyer's new deed and we record it down at the courthouse. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Required ingredients. If a judge is trying to determine the validity of a deed, is this thing valid? This is what the judge is looking for. As with when you're making a cake, aren't there other ingredients that you can choose to add to it? Can't you add icing and sprinkles and cherry on top? The icing is not a required ingredient, right? Same thing with the deed. You got your required ingredients, but you may have additional stuff as well. Look with me, if you will, on page 88. And you see a list there on page 88 of things that are not required, but often found in a deed anyway. Again, what you're looking at on your screen is what the judge is looking for. Anything else is not required. It's the sprinkles on the cake, if you will. Deeds don't have to be witnessed to be valid. Can they be witnessed? Sure, but they don't have to be valid. Deeds don't have to be dated to be valid, but doesn't it make sense to put a date on it? Of course it does. The judge is not going to look for a date. Deeds don't have to include the certain amount, the exact amount of consideration. Consideration is how much money did you pay for the property. There's got to be some form of consideration, but very rarely what we see is an exact amount. Deeds don't have to be acknowledged. They don't have to be notarized. Are they often notarized? Yes, but a judge is not looking for that. They can be notarized. They often are. This next one is the problem topic in this unit. Deeds don't have to be recorded to be valid. However, we have an act that steps up and says, we are going to require it to be valid. So the judge is not looking for it to be recorded. But we have somebody called the Connor Act that requires deeds to be recorded. This is very important. We don't record because it's an essential element of a valid deed. We record our deeds because of the Connor Act. In other words, when a judge is trying to determine the validity of a deed, they don't care if it's recorded or not. It's the Connor Act that requires it to be recorded. Does everybody see that? Will you please highlight it and underline it and draw an arrow to it? The Connor Act. And we're going to talk more about the Connor Act. This is your brief introduction to the Connor Act. We will talk more about Connor. It's not an essential element to record. And then the last one there, deeds don't have to have a seal. If you've ever seen a seal on a document, it kind of embosses the document. It makes it kind of rough. You know what I'm saying? Like it puts a little seal on it and it imprints the document. Again, not an essential element. That's not what the judge is looking for. Question comes in, with the title attorney, we use closing attorneys. Would the title attorney record the deed if dealing with the closing attorney does record that? Yes, the closing attorney will record the deed, and they can record in different counties. Again, though, does everybody hear me? It's not because it's determining the validity of a deed because we record. It's Connor that tells us that we have to record. To be enforceable against claiming, that's right. That's right. The whole reason why we record, again, we'll talk more about the Connor Act in just a minute. But why does Connor say we have to record? So you have proof, so you have evidence, so it can be enforceable against third parties. Connor Act is specific to North Carolina. We'll talk more about Connor in just a bit. If I were you guys, for your homework this weekend, I would write down the essential elements of a deed at the top of page 87. And then right next to it, or right below it, I would write the elements that are not required on page 88. So you can see those differences. Things that are required and things that are the icing on the cake. The things that are often there, but not considered a required ingredient. Questions?
I have a question, Miss Julie. I'm sorry.
No, please.
It's for when I'm reading under grantor, and I was reading last night, it says a grantor has to have a deed executed by a person who has been judged legally incompetent is considered to be void. I don't understand that.
So if you don't have mental capacity, you can't convey your deed. And that's what we're saying right here. We have to have legal capacity of the person. They need to be of their right mind, their sound and sober mind, and their right mental capacity to be able to convey the deed. Remember, this is voluntarily. So if somebody is under the influence, or if they don't have the mental capacity, how do we know that they know what they're voluntarily conveying? And that's what we're saying, legal capacity of the grantor, of the person given the deed. Good question comes in about consideration. It's kind of one of those, I would consider, look back with me on page 87. Consideration is not mentioned on this list. And the reason it's not is because you do see some form of consideration on a deed, but very rarely is it for the exact amount. So you're not going to say, I purchased your property for X amount, but you're going to see, and the verbiage of it is weird. It's like for a tenth of $20, or, something official like that or something. So yes, there is some form of consideration stated, but very rarely is it the exact amount. It ain't nobody's business what I paid for your house, is it? So we don't need that on the deed. Okay, good stuff, isn't it? Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and take our last break. When we come back, we got several different types of deeds. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the types of deeds. So let's take 10. All right. We good for the last hour? Not even 55 minutes. All right. So we're back. Camera's on and I can see you. I'm going to take attendance. Oh, Haley, I just caught you. All right. So we've defined the essential elements of a valid deed. Again, when we refer to a valid deed, we're saying, what's the judge looking for? How is the judge determine the validity of a deed? And in addition to the essential elements, it's not uncommon to have added ingredients, extra ingredients, the icing, the sprinkles, the cherry, the nuts, whatever else it is you like to put on cake. Ice cream, that goes good sometimes too. So those are all our non-essential elements that we see on page 88. Compare those to the essential elements. What's the judge looking for? We have a couple different types of deeds. So let's talk about our different types of deeds. The first one we have, the most common, the one that we see the most often, is called a general warranty deed. The general warranty deed is the best deed for the grantee. Who's the grantee? The receivee of the deed. Who's the receivee? The buyer. The general warranty deed is the best deed for the buyer. Why? Because it gives the grantor the greatest degree of liability. It provides the most protection for the grantee. Now, we refer to it as general warranty deed. Just FYI, you may see it also referred to as full covenant warranty deed, warranty deed. One of these things, we got different names that mean the same thing. So just kind of AKAs. The grantor in the general warranty deed is legally bound by certain warranties. The grantor offers warranties to the grantee. The warranties or the covenants that the grantor offers the grantee, and these are all listed for you on page 89. The general warranty deed, the grantor is conveying to the grantee the covenant of cession and the right to convey. The grantor is warranting that they are the legal owner of title, the legal owner of record, and they have the right to convey the title. They are the ones that have the right to voluntarily alienate themselves from the deed. The grantor is warranting to the grantee against encumbrances. What are encumbrances? Everything we talked about in Unit 3. Liens, encroachments, easements. If there's liens on the property, the grantor is saying, hey, I'll pay them off before I convey. Remember, we said the seller is required to pay off any of those liens before they give their deed to the buyer, and they're making that promise to them that they have done so in the general warranty deed. The grantor is offering a covenant of quiet enjoyment. The grantor warrants that the new deed will be good against third parties. They're saying, you don't have to worry about this long lost relative that's going to show up and try to lay claim to the property. I'm the legal owner of record. I have the right to convey, and you can enjoy it. You have that quiet enjoyment, and you don't have to worry about interference or noise, if you will, from third parties. The grantor is offering the grantee this warranty or covenant of further assurance. The grantor is telling the grantee, look, if anything happens in the future and I need to provide further assurance, I need to provide further documentation to make the title good, I'll do it. So if there's something we don't catch now, I'll come back and fix it. The grantor is also offering the warranty of warranty forever. The grantor guarantees that if any time in the future the title fails, they'll make it right. These are some strong promises, aren't they? The seller's offering some big, big promises. Question comes in, is it possible for a buyer to receive a property with an unpaid lien? Remember we talked about mechanics liens? Is that possible? Sure. And although they are not required, the creditors are able to take action on the property to get their money back. Yeah, mechanics liens, as we talked about in Unit 3. This is why we have what we're going to talk about, something called title insurance. Title insurance protects the current owner from errors of the past. So what if any of these covenants or any of these warranties fail? The new owner has title insurance. What's insurance do? Insurance protects you when something goes wrong, right? If you get hurt, you got health insurance. If you wreck your car, you got car insurance. So title insurance protects you if something goes wrong. And we'll talk about it in just a second. General warranty deed is the most common. It's the most popular. When we look at our standard, when we look at our sales contract in Unit 10, we're going to see that it specifically says general warranty deed. If your buyers are or sellers are using any of the other deeds that we're getting ready to talk about next, we're going to have to get our attorney involved. Okay, general warranty is the most common. It's the best one for the grantor because it offers them the most protection. It's the best one for the grantee. It's the best one for the grantee because it offers them the most protection from the grantor. And it's the one, again, in practice, every closing I've ever brokered has had a general warranty deed. Most common. Again, my homeowners on the call, if you look at your deed, we'll talk a minute about how you can pull it up on public records if you can't find it in your file cabinet. If you look at your deed at the top, it probably says general warranty deed. It tells you that's the type of deed you're receiving. Another type of deed is called a special warranty deed. Special warranty deed is also known as the limited warranty deed. Why? Because there's not as many warranties. There's only 2 warranties. There's only 2 covenants. The grantor says, I've received the title. The grantor says the property was not encumbered during the time that I owned it. So there's only the 2 warranties, only the 2 covenants. I received it and it wasn't encumbered while I owned it. And if there were, I'll fix it before we go to closing. This is one big difference between special warranty deed and the general warranty deed. The special warranty deed is only promising no issues during the time that I owned it. The general warranty deed is saying there were no issues during the time I owned it or ever in the past. The general warranty deed goes back to the beginning of time. Once again, better protection for the grantee. So the special warranty deed is to say, hey, while I had title, nothing was encumbered. The general warranty deed is saying, well, I had title and anybody before me. Typically, where we may see a special warranty deed in North Carolina is with foreclosures. How do you choose which one? You don't. The attorney does. If you're using the sales contract that says general warranty deed, then that's the deed you're going to use because that's the deed that the parties agreed to in the sales contract. Again, in North Carolina, where we may see a special warranty deed is associated with foreclosures. We're going to talk about foreclosures. We got our financing units, our money units in units 14 and 15. So we'll talk a little bit about foreclosures then. But when the bank takes a property, for example, they may, once they take it and then they resell it, they may just offer a special warranty deed. If you're buying a property from a bank, you may have a different contract. that specifies a special warranty deed. Do we help with foreclosures? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Some people that purchase, people don't have to have real estate agents. Let's just get out there. People buy and sell houses every day without the assistance of an agent. You don't have to hire an agent, but if they want to hire me to help them purchase the foreclosure, can I? Sure. Absolutely. Okay. Another type of deed, very rarely that we might see, is something called a bargain and sale deed. We don't do these in North Carolina. In North Carolina, we do something called a quit claim deed, which I'm talking about next. So hang tight. What do you guys think of when you think about the bargain and sale bin in the back of the store? Cheap, discounted, price to sell, right? It's kind of what we're doing with a bargain and sale deed here. There are no express warranties. Remember with the other day, we compared something express to something that's implied. Express means all the terms have been clearly stated. So with a bargain and sale deed, there are no express warranties. All the warranties are implied. It's demonstrated by the actions. See why I want this in the back in the bargain and sale bin? There are no express warranties. There are no covenants. It's all just, you assume that I'm handing you a good deed. It's implied. Does that sit well with you? If you're buying a house, I wouldn't think so. Again, we don't do these much in North Carolina. The closest thing we have to compare these to is a quit claim deed. What's a quit claim deed? A quit claim deed is a non-warranty deed. How many warranties in a quit claim deed? 0. There are no covenants. There are no warranties. In North Carolina, we might use a quit claim deed, maybe to cure a cloud on the title. When we're referring to a cloud on the title, we're referring to some kind of defect. A cloud on the title is some kind of defect. Maybe somebody's name was misspelled. Maybe the property address is wrong. Humans prepare these deeds. Humans make mistakes. So we might use a quit claim deed to cure a cloud, to fix a mistake. We may also use a quit claim deed to create or terminate an easement. We're not conveying property. There are no warranties to convey. Remember the other day too, when we were talking about tenancy by the entirety? And we said the act of getting married does not create tenancy by the entirety. So we gave an example of somebody owning property and then they get married. They could use a quit claim deed to create tenancy by the entirety. So in a sense, you would be conveying from me to us once we get married. Again, we're not offering any warranties or covenants. Pages 90 to 91 just kind of list some other North Carolina special purpose deeds. You can see the green star here. I would just have a very basic understanding of the other different types of deeds that we could see in North Carolina. Maybe instead of a quit claim deed, we use a correction deed to fix a mistake. Who decides which deed to use? The attorney. The attorney may use the quit claim deed or the correction deed to fix an error, incorrect address, misspelled name. Trustee's deed could be used to convey property when a trustee is involved. We talked very briefly at the end of Unit 2 about trusts, the trustee being the third party that's managing the affairs on behalf of the grantor for the beneficiary. So that could be used, a trustee's deed. Sheriff's deed, if the judge takes the property, if the court takes the property, they may take the property using a sheriff's deed. I always remember it this way. If the court takes the property, does the judge themselves go knocking on the door saying, I'm taking your property? No. Who do they send? They send the sheriff. Deed of gift. If you want to give your property, no consideration. Well, that's not true. Consideration might be something of love and affection. You're just gifting your property. Deed of release, the top of page 91, that's my favorite. Isn't that what we get up and go to work for every day? Once you pay off that mortgage, you can release the lender. Pay it in full. They'll file a deed of release to release the lender from the property. That's what I get up and try to go to work for every day. Get this mortgage paid off. I'm 2 years into it. I got a ways to go. Unless we win the lottery tonight, of course. We'll send you guys an email if that happens. We'll well, actually, Lane will. I'm out of here.
Miss Julie, I don't see sheriff's deed.
Sheriff's deed executed pursuant to a court order. This classification covers deeds such as sheriff's deed, tax deed, guardian's deed.
What page is that?
Page 91. We're on pages 90 and 91. Deed executed pursuant to a court order.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm. Somebody just wished me good luck for winning the lottery tonight. Thank you. Okay. So the first method of transferring titles, voluntary alienation. You are voluntarily separating yourself from your property. How are you doing that? You're doing it with a deed. You are voluntarily handing your deed over somebody else saying, here you go. It's yours now. The second way to transfer title could be by involuntary alienation. You're separating yourself involuntarily. Usually this is losing your property by operation of law. The courts have come in and taken the property. I'm getting there. There's a very nice chart in your book on page 92. I like pictures and graphs. Do you guys like pictures? So there's a nice chart, a nice picture on page 92 of the different ways you can lose your property involuntarily, carried out by operation of law. The first method of involuntary alienation is by escheat. When somebody passes away without a will or heirs, when an individual dies with no will, no heirs, the process of what happens to the property is by escheat. The state will take the property and do with it whatever they wish. When an individual dies, no will, no heirs, another form of involuntary alienation is something called eminent domain. You guys heard of this one? We generally don't like this, do we? Eminent domain is the right that the government has to take your property as long as they can justify taking it for the public good. Maybe they're taking your whole entire property. Maybe they're just taking a portion of it. No matter where you live, you probably don't have to drive far without seeing construction, highway construction, road construction. Have you guys ever known of areas or seen areas where they might widen the road? Maybe it was a 2-lane road, but now it's awfully busy, so we're going to make it a 2-lane with a median or a 4-lane road. When they come in and widen the road, they're taking some of your road frontage. some of your property, and they would take that by eminent domain. If the government takes your property for eminent domain, they have to offer just compensation. The reason I have just compensation in quotes is because this is where we tend to battle or want to battle with the government. They will pay you the value of what they're taking. If it's the whole property, they'll pay you that value. If it's just part of the road frontage to widen the road, they will pay you for that compensation. What you don't get compensated for is the loss of value that your property has because now your house is 5 feet closer to the new 4-lane road. You guys with me? So it doesn't look into the overall big picture. It just looks into how much of your land, how much of your property am I actually taking? This one pops up on the news every once in a while. And homeowners want to argue, they want to fight with the government. I've never tried to argue with the government myself, but I have a feeling that, and sometimes people win. I'm not saying this is always a dead end. Sometimes people win, but pretty much, you guys, if the government's saying they're going to come take your land for public good, deal. I mean, it's kind of like that, isn't it? If a property that's leased is being taken by eminent domain, then that's going to terminate the lease. Operation of law. We're going to talk all about tenants. Tenants have rights, by the way. We're going to talk about tenants' rights. Unit 11 is dedicated to our landlord and tenant relationship. By the way, the process of eminent domain, somebody said something in the chat, that process is what's known as condemnation. Condemnation is the process of taking the property for eminent domain. Yep. Another involuntary alienation, another way the courts can take the property is by foreclosure. Failure to pay your mortgage, failure to pay that monthly mortgage payment. When you miss a certain amount of payments, you could lose your property to foreclosure. Again, we're going to talk all about foreclosure in units 14 and 15. The last method of involuntary alienation, the way the courts can take the property, is something called adverse possession. You guys remember back in unit 3, we talked about easement by prescription, where you could have an easement placed on your property. So you can use my property for 20 years and I've not stopped you. And now you can come in and call for an easement. And we said, when we get to unit 5, we're going to take it a step further and say how not only could you lose, have the easement by prescription, but we could take it a step further and say, if you've been using somebody's property for 20 years, you may lose title. And how you lose that title is called involuntary alienation. In order for somebody to claim, adverse possession. You know what I'm saying. Adverse possession, a form of involuntary alienation. In order for somebody to claim adverse possession, first off, they're claiming it with the judge. In order for somebody to claim adverse possession, they're claiming it because they have reason to believe that that land is theirs. Why do they have reason to believe that? Because they've been using it for the last 20 years. If my fence has been here for 20 years and it's never bothered you now, why can't I just have the property? Somebody said squatters. Absolutely. If I've been squatting on your property for 20 years, don't I have the right to lay claim to that property? You've not stopped me. Adverse possession is how the owner may lose title because the claimant has reason to believe the land is theirs. Now, we've been talking about color, we've been talking about how long. I'm getting a lot of questions. Bear with me. I'm going to try and get them everything answered. So how long? Well, it depends on whether or not you have color of title. And I'm getting to ocean too, I promise you. It depends on how long you have color of title, or if you have color of title. Color of title just is some kind of faulty document that leads you to believe the property is yours or not. If you have some kind of faulty document, you can claim adverse possession within 7 years. If you don't have color of title, you can claim adverse possession within after 20 years. That makes sense? With color of title, 7 years. Without color of title, 20 years. Color of title is just some kind of faulty document. In order for an individual to claim adverse possession, they have to go in front of the judge and claim ocean. The judge is going to ask them a series of questions. And depending on these questions is whether or not the individual has the right to claim adverse possessions. The judge is going to ask them, was your use open? Was it well known to others? Or were you hiding the fact that you were using the property? Is it hard to hide a fence? Yeah. If you move your trailer on the land, isn't it hard to hide that? How open was the use? The judge is going to ask, has the use been continuous? You've been using it continuously for 20 years. The judge is going to ask if the use was exclusive. Were you the only one using it in the last 20 years? There can only be one claimant to be awarded adverse possession. Adverse means that the claimant has to claim it. It doesn't just happen automatically. The claimant has to go to the judge and claim it. I've been using it for 20 years. And then notorious means that it's well known and without permission of the owner. Again, you're not hiding it. It's out there, it's open, and you don't have permission of the owner. Y'all want to know the best way to avoid somebody by claiming adverse possession on part of your property? Give them permission to be there. You can work legal battles, other ways to get them off, but if you give them permission, when the judge gets to the end, to notorious, and they say, do you have permission to be there? And the claimant says, yes, I do. I can't give this to you adverse possession because you had permission to be there. So how do you stop somebody from doing this? Give them permission, hire you a good attorney, and work other ways to get them off your property. I was fortunate enough one time to have a police officer in pre-licensing, and he was very helpful in this part. And he explained to us that getting somebody off of your property isn't as easy as one may think. Because what if they think they have a right to be there? You know what I'm saying? So just telling somebody to go, getting a squatter off your land is not as easy as what we would think. And this is why we get the judge and attorneys involved. Let's see. A false document, so maybe fraud. For example, fraud, forgery, that could give us false documents to make you think that it's yours. Is the owner notified to argue against this? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Owner gets involved. How would they handle multiple people using an access road for 20 years and that wouldn't be exclusive? So they wouldn't be able to claim adverse possession. What else can we do? I don't know, hire your attorney. But that is one of the keys to claim adverse possession. It's got to be exclusive. You're the only user, the only claimant. Is this mind-blowing information? Every time I teach this, I get here, I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, so guys, we got to pay attention to what's going on our land, right? Let's think about an abandoned property. Let's say you have somebody that moves here from, I don't know, pick a state, Texas. And they come to Texas and they buy land, and then they're here for a couple years and they decide North Carolina is not for them. So they go back to Texas. They're still paying their taxes every year, right? So nobody's bothering them there. And in the meantime, somebody moves their trailer onto the property. They're hanging out for 20 years. You don't come and check on your land. You just pay the taxes every year. The neighbors don't say anything, you know, you're just there for 20 years. That's somebody that might be able to claim adverse possession. So if you abandon your property, it may not be a bad idea to check in on it periodically. Keep an eye on it. How are you going to get compensated if you lose your property for adverse possession? That's up to the judge. That's up to the judge. How and if you might get compensated for losing your property. 20 years is a long time. Let's see. What if you improve the property? Would that help with adverse possession? I don't know if it would help or not. I don't know if the judge would really care about that. But you would still, if you improved on it, you'd be using it openly, right? You build a building on it. So that would be a very open. You can't hide a building unless you're David Copperfield or something. I don't think any of us are. So we can't hide a building or a fence or a structure. What about with tenants? If they say someone can be there, but the landlord says, no, they can't. Well, the landlord is the owner. So again, tenants, I probably run into squatters most with tenants. Again, we'll talk in Unit 11, the landlord's rights to try to get squatters off their land. And hopefully it's not taking them 20 years, so tenants wouldn't have the right to claim that. 20 years is a long time. From some of your introductions, I know some of you are about that old. So for some of it, doesn't that make the rest of us feel old? But for some of you, you can say for your life, if you've had that property, 20 years is a long time, unless you're only 20, then it's not. To be 20 again. Actually, I'd rather be 21 again. If I had to go back, I don't want to go back any further than 21. All right, so if we claim adverse possession, if the judge gets involved and he grants either the whole land or a portion of the land, if that's what the fence sitting on, they're going to have something, the legal process is something called an action to quiet title. Anytime there's any kind of title dispute, then the lawsuit is going to be referred to action to quiet title. So if there is an adverse possession, for example, anytime we have any kind of title dispute, the attorneys and the judge, we're going to get involved in this action to quiet title. So let's look at an example together. Adverse possession example together. How could this mean for us as brokers? So a broker is contacted by a prospective client who wants to sell 5 acres of land. Yay! The client explains that while he has no deed, both he and his father have farmed the land for over 25 years without any objection from the owner of record. That just kind of put a kink in your listing. I want to sell this land, but I don't have a deed, but I've been here for 25 years. While a potential adverse possession may exist, the client must first prove to the court that he and his father have met all requirements to obtain title by adverse possession. What should the broker do? Advise them to call their attorney, and y'all do not list that property until this gets resolved. Involuntary alienation. You don't have control about whether or not you've separated yourself, or you will separate yourself from your property. So we've talked about voluntary alienation, involuntary alienation. Another way that you can transfer title, another method for transferring title, is by descent. Transferring by descent means you don't have a will, but you do have heirs. Remember we said escheat was no will, no heirs. Descent is no will, but you do have heirs. So in a sense, what's going to happen is once the individual passes away, the state will try to make a will and pass the property on to their heirs, if they can find heirs. So escheat, no will, no heirs. Descent, no will with heirs. And the state will try to, in a sense, create a will. And then the last method of transferring title is with a will. So hopefully the will is conveying real property and any personal property. If we want to get technical to the terms, a devise is transferring real property by will. A bequest is transferring personal property by will. Okay. Question comes in, how can we research titles? We don't. Who researches titles? The attorney. I mean, you can go to the Register of Deeds of that county where the property is located. But title search, title opinion, title, that's the attorney's job. So remember what we said at the very beginning. Let's talk a little bit more about title. The beginning of this unit, remember we said title is the right to ownership. Deed is the documentary evidence. Question comes in, can you search your own title? Yes. You go to the Register of Deeds and the county and where the property is located. So title is the right to ownership. Deed is the proof. Deed is the documentary evidence. So let's talk about the attorneys. What's the attorney do for title? One thing that the attorney does is title examination. The attorney is going to perform a very thorough search of the public records. They're going to look for anything recorded that affects this title. Public records are open to whom? The public, everybody. So back to our original question. Can you go online today, this afternoon after class and find your own deed? Yeah. Why? Because it's public record. Is that unsettling? I know that was a little to think that it's out there for everybody. Guilford County GIS Register of Deeds, start with Google. Guilford County Register of Deeds, Forsyth County, wherever the property is located. And I'm assuming we're doing this after class, right? We're not searching for our titles right now in the middle of class, are we? Everybody shake your head no, Julie. I'm not allowing myself to get distracted by finding my deed right now. Okay. So the title examination, the public record search for closing purposes is performed by an attorney. The reason that we record certain documents, for example, being the deed, is to give notice that you are the owner of record. There's a couple of different types of notices. If you'll look real quick on page 96, just as kind of a side note, constructive notice. The documents have been placed in the public record along with the physical possession of the property. Constructive notice has been given. Actual notice is direct knowledge. Someone has been given the information and they actually know about it. I just gave you guys actual notice that your title is on record. Maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't. Now you do. You've been given actual notice. One thing that the attorney is looking for when they're doing their title examination is a chain of title. They want to make sure that the conveyance is linked. They're going to go back and do a search, and they're going to go back and look at the history of the title. And what the attorney is looking for with these conveying links, they want to make sure that the grantor on this deed matches the grantee on the previous deed. And when they look at the previous deed, they want to make sure that the grantor on that deed matches the grantee on the previous deed. They're going back and making sure all those conveyances link, that we have a chain of title, that we could go back and show the previous owner to the previous owner to the previous owner, theoretically back to whenever we started recording. Now, the attorneys don't have to go back that far. I'll talk about that in just a second. What they're looking for is a gap in the chain. They're looking if there's any inconsistencies with that chain. If the attorney finds inconsistencies, if they find a gap or a cloud on title, any kind of defect on the title, it's the attorney's job to get it cleared up for the buyer so the seller can convey the property to them. The attorney is the one for making sure that the title that the seller is conveying is good marketable title. That is the seller's biggest responsibility, is to deliver that marketable title, the grantor to the grantee. And are we going to take the seller's word on it that it's marketable? If you're buying a house, are you going to take the seller's word? No. What are you going to do? You're going to have an attorney determine this for you. So even though we can we technically go do this ourselves because it's all public record? Yes. But we're going to let the attorney do it because they're the ones that know what they're looking for. They're the one, stay in your lane. Let the attorney do their job. You do yours. The attorney, let's see. Yeah, so the attorney does the title search. Again, the title search assures the buyer, the new owner, that the title has been examined, it's been studied. The attorney says, all these conveyances link, there are no gaps, there are no cloud in the title, there are no defects. If they are, we'll get them straightened out. Maybe the attorney and the seller have to go stand in front of a judge and have the judge do that action to quiet the title. Maybe the judge can resolve it and make it right. Are there unpaid liens? We're going to pay them off before we convey. The attorney, even though the attorney represents the buyer, if there are any defects, the attorney is going to work with the seller to make sure that their buyer client gets this good marketable title. The attorney, depending on the property and the circumstances, the attorney may do something called an abstract of title. This is like the Cliff's Notes. This is the abbreviated history. So they may just do an abstract of title, condensed search. If they have no flags to go up, they may claim it's marketable. If they have flags go up, they're going to dig a little deeper. North Carolina, we have something called the Marketable Title Act. And what the Marketable Title Act says, if the attorney can trace the title back, if we can go back and link those conveyances for 30 years, and we don't find in that time any claims, any issues, any gaps, any defects, if all looks good for the past 30 years, the attorney can claim that title marketable. Again, if they find anything, they may go back further, they may dig a little deeper, they may investigate it further. But generally speaking, if they can go back 30 years and they can't find any claim, they can claim the title is marketable. So what if you're buying a house from somebody that has lived there for the past 35 years? Can we assume that it's marketable? First off, when you hear the word assume, y'all throw a flag up, please do. Just because somebody might have lived there for the last 35 years, that doesn't automatically mean that it's marketable. What if somebody put a mechanic's lien on it 10 years ago, right? Remember what we said, you may or may not know that there's a mechanic's lien. So even if you've owned the property for more than this, it's not an automatic, it's the attorney that needs to determine if it's marketable. If they do this search and they find this mechanic's lien from 10 years ago, you might just be as shocked as they are, right? So buyers can't waive the attorneys doing their job, but if they could, they'd still always would want the attorney to do it regardless of how long you own the property. I had a pre-licensing student argue with me. She said that her and her husband bought land and they were building, and she was trying to save some money, and she was trying to convince her agent to convince the attorney to waive the title search because the structure is new. But I need you guys to understand, when you're doing a title search, remember what we said on day one, structures come and go. What I care about is the property, the land. So just because she's building new construction and she can lay claim to those wood and bricks and mortar, they don't know about the land until they do that title search. So, well, that's what my agent told me to. So maybe that's exactly right. We're not necessarily searching the structure, we're searching the property, and the property includes everything in it, including the dirt. Guys, this house has not always been here. And that's what we want to make sure, is that the history, as Sydney says, thank you, is of the land. I don't care about the house. I don't know whatever happened with that. I let it go. I wasn't going to win that one. A question comes in, if a lien is 35 years back, it still needs to be cleared. Absolutely. The only way to clear a lien is to pay off the loan. How do you clear a lien? Pay off that debt. Okay. Another thing that the attorney does, they make arrangements for title insurance. One of the last things that happens in the closing process, the attorney offers their title opinion to the title insurance company. And based upon the attorney's title opinion is when title insurance will agree to protect the owner. So title insurance protects the owner against any losses, against errors of the past, that we'll call them. The owner being the new owner. Today they're the buyer, tomorrow they're the owner. You guys with me? You buy my house today. Today you're just a buyer, tomorrow you're the owner. You're the owner of record. Title insurance is going to protect you from any errors on the past. Maybe I had work done to the property before I sold it to you and I didn't pay it. And the mechanic came after closing and filed the lien. Remember, we said the mechanic has 120 days to file a lien, right? So I did the work, I don't pay it. The attorney does the title search They don't find the lien because the mechanic hasn't filed it yet. Mechanic files it after closing. You now fast forward, go to sell the property, and you find out for the first time that there's a mechanic's lien on you. This is when title insurance protects you. Title insurance protects the current owner from errors of the past. If, for example, somebody's asking about what would happen if there is an error of the past, title insurance is almost always going to go after the previous owner first, particularly if we used a general warranty deed. Because remember, the general warranty deed, the grantor said, this isn't going to happen. I promise you this won't happen. And now it has, and title insurance is going to go back to them and make it right. What if they're broke? What if they're dead? What if they're MIA? What if, right? That's when title insurance will take care of it. That's what, again, think about what insurance is. Insurance protects you if something goes wrong, right? Auto insurance, health insurance is meant to protect you if something goes wrong. Title insurance is here to protect you if something goes wrong based on past for your title. Typically, there are 2 title insurance policies. One for the current owner. Yesterday they were the buyer, today they're the owner. If they purchased using a lender, the lender is going to have a policy as well. The lender has an interest in the property. We'll talk, I'm getting ready to wrap up. We'll pick back up here on whenever we meet again, Tuesday. So 2 policies, assuming the lender's involved. Obviously, if it's a cash buyer, there is no lender, and we're just looking at the owner's policy. The owner's title insurance policy covers them for as long as they own the property. May that be 2 years, may that be 50. It covers them for as long as they own the property. Title insurance will cover the lender for as long as there's a loan on the property. Once that mortgage is paid off, the lender no longer has an interest. So we're going to wrap, don't go anywhere just yet. We're going to wrap up here today. Just to let you guys know, we're awfully close to the end of Unit 5. So what is next week going to look like? Well, let's talk about, remember your homework assignment is always to look at where we've been and talk about where we're going. So we've already blown through units 1, 2, and 3, most of 4, most of 5. So you can review those this weekend, work on your math for unit 3. When we come together on Tuesday, we're going to go back and do the math of unit 4. So if you want to look ahead at that, you all are going to tell me there's how many square feet in an acre? I can see your mouths move. 43,560. So you're all going to tell me that on Tuesday when we come together. So we're going to take that number and work with it. Then on Tuesday, we're going to finish unit 5. Not too much more to say in unit 5. We'll get into unit 6. After unit 6, we do unit 20. Remember, I don't go in order of the textbook. I go in order of the syllabus. So you can always refer to your tentative schedule of what we do next. And then after 20, we do finish 4, finish 5. We'll do 6, we'll do 20. And then we're going to start on unit 7. Unit 7 is when we start getting in the meat, in the good stuff, if you will. So we'll talk more about unit 7. If you will, please look ahead. 5, finish 6, 20. And then 7, we'll probably see that Thursday, some point next week. Sound good? Sound good. Thumbs up. Thank you, guys. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Put the book down sometimes, right? Don't spend your whole weekend with your nose in the book or working. Go out and have some fun too. Find that balance. Please don't hesitate to let me know if I can answer any questions. Never hesitate to reach out to me. Otherwise, you guys, it's 1 p.m. on the dot. So you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you Tuesday morning. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.